Welcome to the Productivity and Planning Masterclass. I'm so excited that you are joining me here today for this video masterclass event. It's actually been about 2 years since I first launched this class. I did the first live event in August of 2015, and yeah, we're coming up to 2 years on the event, and I thought it was time for us to give this class a facelift, right? So what I've done is I've gone through and I've upgraded some of the materials, and I have added some more, strategies and content to the class just to make this a more well-rounded learning experience for all of you. So if any of you are OGs who were at the original event or owned the original masterclass, much of this is going to be the same, but you are going to get a lot of extra content today. And if you are someone who has just got this masterclass, this is the first time you're experiencing it, welcome, and thank you so much for checking out the class. I hope that it is filled with a lot of tips and information. And you guys know that above all, what I love to focus on when it comes to my classes and when I teach is actionable strategy, right? So I like to focus on actual things you can put into practice, not so much theory. Are we going to talk a little bit of theory today? A little bit, but most of it is going to be actionable steps and actionable items that you're going to be able to take right after this class and get started applying to your own life, to your own planner, and hopefully up your own productivity immediately, okay? So really quickly, I just want to introduce myself. If you're someone who is new to my community, hello and welcome. My name is Alexis, but I'm also known as MissTrenchcoat all across the internet. I design and sell digital tools to help you work smarter, not harder. I have a blog, www.strangecharm.com, where I write about planning and productivity and business and all fun things like that. I have a YouTube channel, youtube.com/MissTrenchcoat, where I make usually weekly videos on productivity and planning and business. And of course, I am also the owner and designer behind thecharmshop.com, which is where you are right now if you're watching this, and it is where you've purchased this wonderful masterclass. So one of the big things that people ask me a lot is why I'm so obsessed with productivity, because this is something that I've been into for a very, very long time. Since I was like very young, I have been into productivity. And the reason that I love productivity, and I know this comes as a shock to so many of you, is that I really truly believe that I am the world's laziest person, okay? And I know that that shocks a lot of people. A lot of people are like, but Alexis, you're so productive and you're so successful. What do you mean? You're always executing. You're always getting things done left and right. Yes, 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 that's true. But like deep down in my heart of hearts, like I'm super lazy. Like I don't want to have to do anything I don't have to do, right? And for me, that's where productivity comes into play, because the art of productivity, right? And I call it an art because like all the wonderful things in life, it is an art form, right? This is like a way of life that is practiced and not just something you learn once. So the art of productivity helps you to accomplish more so you can work less. And I know that that almost sounds like just like a falsehood, like that's some line that I'm throwing you, that you can accomplish more by actually doing less. But when you focus on being productive, you actually are able to achieve more and get more success from doing fewer things. And I'm going to teach you guys today like what that's all about and how you do that for yourself. So for me, when it comes to productivity, the way I look at it is that life is a never-ending series of tasks. Like we're always doing one thing after another after another. So for me, being a student of productivity, right, like learning the art of productivity and how to apply it to my life day in and day out, it helps me to create the life I want to live. That is more success, less actually having to do work, right? So today is about creating more students of productivity. My hope is that you watching this right now, if you're not already someone who's productivity obsessed, and I don't think you have to be as productivity obsessed as I am to, really become successful or accomplish things and, check off your projects and get your goals accomplished. But I do think that, for any of you guys who are getting started with productivity, becoming a student of productivity, understanding that this is a day in and day out sort of practice, and that there's going to be good days and there's going to be bad days, that's really what my hope is really to get more of you thinking about productivity and the way you're living your life and the way you're executing. I want you to think about it more as something that is what you're striving for day in and day out, to be a student of life and to be a student of productivity. Okay, so this is called the Productivity and Planning Masterclass. I know it's not all about productivity. So what about planning? How does planning fit into the concept of productivity? So the way I look at it is that planning is the vehicle by which productivity is accomplished and measured, right? So when I say planning, I don't necessarily mean just having a planner, right? Like, it doesn't matter what your planning system is, if it's paper, if it's digital, if it's a notebook, whatever it is. In order to become productive, you need to spend time planning, like you absolutely do. So if you think that you can just get to work without planning and giving your actions and intentions some foresight, you're not really going to get very far with your productivity, right? So that is why, for me, productivity and planning go hand in hand. So what you're going to be learning today in this discussion of productivity and planning. So this is broken down into 3 parts. Part 1 of today's masterclass is all about understanding productivity. So really understanding what productivity is and getting started on a very basic level. Because I do think that there's a lot of misunderstanding about what productivity is and, what being productive is and what it isn't. And I'm very clear about what it is and what it isn't very shortly. Part 2 is all about the essential planning tools. So I am going to talk about planning methods, digital and physical planning. And of course, I am going to focus a little bit more on physical planning tools, because if you're in my community, you most likely have a paper planner. You may use a paper and a digital planner, together the way I do, but I think that most of us here are into the paper planning tools. So I go a little bit more in depth to paper planning. And then part 3 is all about mastering the fundamental productivity strategies. And that's really where I'm going to be covering a number of different very action-oriented strategies that you can use to start getting more done in your life and checking off more to-dos and getting more projects accomplished and hitting your goals and things like that. So that's going to be part 3. And then we're going to wrap up with the open Q&A. So if you're here on this event live with me right now, you have the opportunity to ask me questions in the chat, and I am more than happy to stay on as long as you need to get all of your questions answered and to help you relate the information and the strategies that we're talking about today to your situation in life. And of course, if you're someone who's watching the replay, you absolutely can shoot me an email. If you have any questions, I am more than happy to answer your questions and help you to figure things out, after the event has, been live. So feel free to make sure, as we're going through this event, write down your questions. You've got the slide handout for you to take notes, and you will be able to write down some questions for me. I'm sure many of your questions will be answered today in the actual event, but anything left over, your time to ask me is after we are done with the masterclass. Okay, so let's just jump right in. Okay, so part 1, understanding productivity, okay? So the big question of the day, what is productivity? So technically, productivity is defined as the effectiveness of productive effort as measured in terms of the rate of output per unit of input. I know. That seems super technical, right? But the way I just like to think about that, or I will translate that into layman's term, it's how much stuff you can accomplish with the least amount of effort, right? Because when it comes to productivity, it's not just about doing a ton of things. It's about doing the things that are necessary so that you're getting things done without going overboard, right? Without putting in too much effort. And for me, that's where this whole concept of work smarter, not harder comes in. And if you are someone who follows me on different platforms, you guys know this is like my mantra. This is like my tagline, because for me, productivity is all about working smarter, not harder. Throwing more effort at tasks or projects or goals is not necessarily the way that you're going to complete them I mean, sometimes more effort helps, right? Like a brute force effort can help, but it's really more about being smarter and giving a little bit of forethought, like I said, planning to what you're about to do so that you're actually taking steps that are necessary and effective and essential and not wasting your time with a whole lot of extra things that will just weigh you down and weigh your day down and make you feel completely overwhelmed. So work smarter, not harder. That is the goal of productivity. So what productivity is not? Productivity is not being busy, okay? So this is probably like the biggest misunderstanding about productivity. People think that productive people are busy people, but busy just means to keep occupied, and I hate busy. Like the word busy really gets to me because I feel like there's this glorification in our society about being really busy. Like if you're not someone who is busy, you're clearly not accomplishing anything. To be honest, if you had, I don't know, a magic mirror and you could watch me all day, you would be very surprised at how not busy I am because I am productive. I'm not busy. I only do things that have a serious effect on the outcomes of what I'm trying to achieve. I don't keep myself, I'm not a busy bee. I'm not trying to keep myself occupied at every second of the day. I mean, I normally am doing something. I'm not just sitting around like twiddling my thumbs, but I'm not busy being around like hitting my projects and hitting my task list super hard because that's not productive. It's a waste of effort for me. And I like a slower pace. Like I said, I'm the world's laziest person. I truly believe that. Okay, so another misunderstanding about productivity. What productivity is not having a to-do list, okay? So it's great to get things done, but are you doing enough of the right things? And I think a lot of times we think that just having a to-do list means that we're productive. You can have a to-do list that is a mile long with a million different things on it, and all of those things you may think you need to do, but really they're not going to have any significant impact on your goals and achieving, projects and outcomes and really your ultimate happiness, right? So having a to-do list is not necessarily something that makes you productive. Is a to-do list, can it be a productive, a tool for productivity? Absolutely. But just keeping a to-do list does not make you a productive person. Having a list of things to do is not productivity. That's more just like being busy, right? And productivity is absolutely not a one-time skill that you learn. Like I said before, my goal today is to create students of productivity because productivity is an ongoing effort that you need to keep on top of. It's not like riding a bike, you don't learn how to do it and then you kind of know how to do it the rest of your life. It is something where if you fall out of the habit of being productive, it does take significant time and effort to get yourself back into the flow because productivity is a flow. And I will talk about that a little bit later. So these are the things that I think are commonly attributed to productivity, and they're just not. It's not being busy. It's not being someone that's got a to-do list. And it's not just something that's one and done and you can call yourself productive. Every day I have to wake up and tell myself I have to be productive in order to be myself, like the productivity guru, right? Because I can lose it at any time. Productivity can be lost at any time. So keep in mind, that is what productivity is not. Okay, so when it comes to being productive, I think there are 3 things that you absolutely need in order to be a productive person, okay? And those 3 things are number 1, focus, okay? Number 2 is the awareness of your priorities. And number 3 are measurable objectives, okay? So if you get all 3 of those things, you need all 3 of those to be a productive person. You need to have focus on what you're doing. You need to be aware of what your priorities are and what is actually important, right? So you're doing more of what matters and less of what doesn't matter. And then, of course, you need measurables. You need objectives that you're going to execute based on, because if you're not measuring what you're executing on, how do you know if you're being productive, right? Like if you're on a diet, right? Unless you're weighing yourself to make sure you're losing weight, you're not, you don't necessarily know if you're being successful in what you're doing. So you need measurable objectives to really be able to gauge and understand your own productivity. Okay, and we're gonna go in depth on those right now. So number 1 is focus, right? So when it comes to finding focus, I realize this is something that so many people struggle with, is getting focused. I get emails, I get comments, I get messages all the time. Alexis, how do I stay focused? How do I get focused? I have a hard time focusing, zeroing in on what I need to do. So when it comes to finding focus, you absolutely need to have a plan, okay? You need to know what you'll be doing and why you're doing it. And I think that having a planner or some sort of planning system is going to help you with this. It's a good idea to have some sort of planner. Like I said, the planning is the vehicle for the productivity. So if you want to get productive and find focus, you need to have your plan in order. So the first thing you need for finding focus is to actually have a plan. The second thing you need is to be prepared. And when I say prepared, I mean mentally prepared and physically prepared. When I talk about mental preparation, right, I'm talking about confidence in your knowledge and your abilities and having a clear and alert mind, okay? So mentally, if you are someone who is going to work in the morning hoping to be focused and productive, if you're sitting there thinking, "Ooh, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, I don't know how to do my work," if you're just feeling confused, if you're not sure, like you don't have a confidence that you're able to execute, then you're not prepared, right? That's not being prepared, right? Because you are not in the right state of mind to actually get focused. And I think that's a really big part of it. For me, mental preparation is actually the hardest preparation there is, because getting your head in the right place can be hard sometimes, especially if you're lacking in confidence. And I feel like for many of you, and I'm just going to go out here on a limb and say, I know that most of you in my community, and probably most of you watching this, are women. And I know that we have a hard time with our confidence because, we're so used to doing for others and putting other people first. But we really need to acknowledge when we know something and when we know we're able to handle something, right? Because we really are most likely more prepared than we even think to handle the tasks and the struggles that we're going to be faced with during the day. So getting your head in the right place, making sure that you're starting your day and starting your focus from a place of confidence is super important. And then, of course, like I said, having a clear and alert mind. Obviously, if you're half asleep in the morning, right, you're not going to be finding focus when you're tired. Finding focus is the hardest thing to do when you're tired. So absolutely want to make sure that mentally you are prepared for your day to get focused. Now, physical preparation. What do I mean by physical preparation? So for me, when it comes to being physically prepared, it means having a good self-care practice in place, like having good self-care practices. So getting enough sleep, eating regular, like healthy meals, and having good hygiene practices to prevent illness. And I know that kind of sounds silly, right? Like, Alexis, what does my self-care have to do with finding focus? Well, if you're feeling crappy because you haven't been taking care of yourself and because you have been running yourself ragged and you're feeling overwhelmed because you've had so much to do, there's no way that you're going to be able to find focus. Like physically, you're not going to be able to get there. Like you're just going to be exhausted, and focus takes so much out of us energetically. It takes so much energy out of us to be focused. So it's very important, I think, first and foremost, to have good self-care practices. And then the second part of being physically prepared is to feel in general good health. And I know that there are many of you out there who struggle with different physical health issues and don't always feel the best every day. And what I'll say about that is what you really need to understand at this point is that you can't be hard on yourself when you aren't productive if it's something related to a health issue that you're facing. In fact, I believe that honoring yourself and your health and understanding that you won't be able to do it all, and even asking for help or saying no to certain obligations or tasks, I think that's going to be necessary. It's really going to be of the utmost importance for you to do that, because I think that putting your health first is obviously the most important thing. So if you're not someone who's feeling in good health all the time, like maybe you're someone who struggles with something that, brings you down physically, I will say, do not be hard on yourself. If you're not able to be as productive as you'd like to be, if you really do want to be more productive, it's going to come down to you asking other people for help or saying no to more things. And I know, again, because we're women, it's hard for us to say no to certain things, but you're going to have to get into that habit if you're someone who is struggling with feeling their best day in and day out. Okay. And I know that there's so many of you, because I get the emails and the messages. I know this is a big thing for many of you who suffer from just illnesses or things that are, just like more permanent, right? So it's not like, someone who's in general good health most of the time and you have like a sick day. I'm talking about people who really are struggling on a day in, day out sort of basis to really get their energy to the point where they can find focus. Give yourself a break on this. Like, your health is the most important thing, and focus takes a lot of energy. I would rather you not be productive and focus your energy on your health than checking things off of a to-do list, to be completely honest. And I hope that your priority is in the same place as well. Okay, so finding focus, needing to be prepared, check. We've got that down. Okay, so I think in order to find focus, you also must have self-discipline. And then for everybody else, I feel like this is one of the big things that a lot of people struggle with as well, is having the self-discipline, because you are ultimately accountable for your actions, right? And if you're not the kind of person who is going to hold their nose to the grindstone to make sure they're getting their work done, that's going to be a struggle for you to find focus and to be productive. So you've got to remember that when it comes down to it, like, this is your life, you're accountable for your actions. So taking responsibility for yourself and acknowledging that productivity requires a certain level of self-discipline, it's absolutely essential. I think when it comes to self-discipline as well, I think it's also very good to understand your working style. And this is a concept that I actually got from Gretchen Rubin in her book, Better Than Before. And what she talks about in her book, amongst other things, it's a wonderful book. I actually think it's in the resource guide for you guys to check out as well in your class materials. What she talks about is that there are 3 different types of working styles, okay? So there are 3 people out there, types of workers. There is number 1, the marathoner, number 2, the sprinter, and number 3, the procrastinator. And to sum up her definition of the 3, the marathoner is the person who likes to work slow and steady on their projects and tasks, okay? So they're the person who likes to do a little bit every day and just move the needle a little bit every day. And at the end of the week or the end of the month or the end of the year, they've accomplished something big, right? Because they've been doing these small, measured, slow and steady activities to move them towards their goals, okay? So that is work style number 1. So if that sounds like you, if you're a slow and steady type of person, you're a marathoner. So it's good to know that you're a marathoner. What are the other options? Number 2 is a sprinter, okay? Personally, I am a sprinter. So I'm someone who, by her definition, Rubin's definition, I like to wait until the last minute and then have the pressure of a time deadline to complete my work. And so if any of you are familiar with me, who have been following me, you guys know that I tend to get a whole bunch done in a short period of time. I do tend to wait to the last minute because I like having that rush. Like, that rush is important to me. So for me, being a marathoner is not going to happen, right? Like, I know that as much as I would love to be a marathoner and like have that slow, steady progression, I like to see results quickly, and I need the pressure of a deadline. I guess I would say that I have a little bit looser of a self-discipline, right? The marathoner probably has the best self-discipline. They wake up every day and they do a little bit every day to get them to their goal. I have a little bit of a looser self-discipline, right? I have to have that deadline that says this is happening, and then I will get to work. But I get to see a whole bunch of progress in a short amount of time, and I've got a tremendous amount of focus. Like, I can go in and work on a project and just dive in and give it to my full focus, and then, in a certain period of time, a shorter period of time, the whole thing is completed. Where a marathoner may have needed to take a more significant amount of time to get something done, I could get it done really quickly because I'm able to focus. And then that third working style that Rubin describes in her book is the procrastinator. I know, and there's probably many of you here today that are saying, oh, I'm a procrastinator. So the procrastinator is the person who tries to avoid their work and will wait until the last minute. Now, this is the thing, okay? It almost sounds like you're a sprinter, right? The sprinter and the procrastinator are very similar until you get to one defining difference. The procrastinator, waiting until the last minute, instead of getting that rush from the deadline that the sprinter gets, the procrastinator feels immediate overwhelm and then shuts down and then doesn't do the work or isn't able to complete it. So I think it's very important for you to understand the type of person you are. And I think that there's no good, better, best in terms of the marathoner and the sprinter. Obviously, being the procrastinator is not ideal, right? A procrastinator is not the ideal situation. That's not what we want to be, is the person who's constantly procrastinating because it's not productive, right? And you're not really accomplishing much if you're a constant procrastinator. So I think the important thing that you get out of this conversation of your working style is that it's really important, number one, to acknowledge what it is that you are. Like, own what you are and understand what you're going to need to do on a planning perspective in order to execute properly. Because from a planning perspective, the marathoner is going to want to have, like, project plans where they're doing a little bit every day over a longer course of time. For me, the sprinter, I like to have all of my work like bulked up and get a lot of it done at one time. And then the procrastinator, obviously, if you know you're a procrastinator, maybe it might be, you may need to look at the idea of this marathoner versus the sprinter and decide, do I feel like I wanted to be slow and steady, or do I want to do things quickly? And you really need to evaluate in your own life, in your own personality, which one really will work better for you, and obviously test it out, see which one works better for you. But acknowledging that you need the self-discipline in order to even start getting things done, right? That's really important here. So acknowledge what your working style is and use it to your advantage, because there are advantages to all of them, except for being the procrastinator. Okay, and then finally, you need to understand your optimal working environment, right? So this is a big thing that a lot of people talk about, having the right environment to get your work done. So really you need to ask yourself here at this point is that, do you work best in a messy environment, or do you work best in an orderly environment, right? So for me, it's really funny actually, because I'm pretty OCD. So I do like to have certain things in order when I'm getting to work, but I've actually been finding that I'm able now to work on the fly in messy environments too. But I definitely know when I'm sitting down to do a really important project, my desk better be clean. My office needs to be clean. I know I need to get it done first before I'm going to be able to sit down and feel like I have a clear mind to get the work done. So are you someone who works best in the creative, messy space, or do you need the orderly environment in order to get down to focus? Do you need music to be playing, or do you need to work in silence? For me, that depends on the situation of what I'm actually working on, honestly. You guys know, if you've been following me or reading my blog, you know that I love music, and I really do think that music can really help you be more productive. I listen to a lot of classical music and things like that. But for sometimes, especially when I'm writing, I can't listen to music that has lyrics because the words will trip me up while I'm writing, right? So, think about that. Do you need music to be playing, or do you need to work in silence? Some people like to go to a coffee shop and have that sort of white noise in the background, and that's cool too. If that's your style, you just need to acknowledge what the environment is that helps you to find focus. Also, you need to ask yourself, do you get easily distracted by your gadgets? Now, for me, as someone who works from home, I've got a lot of gadgets around me, and they're usually constantly dinging. So if you know that you're someone that gets distracted by having, a web page open on your computer while you're at work, or you're someone who will take a meeting and your phone will go off, and then, you're checking your phone, and that's, distracting. Really get honest with yourself about what is preventing you from finding focus, because ultimately, your gadgets can go off, they can ring and ding, and it might be cool to have the TV on or, surf a web page, but you're really just stopping yourself from being fully focused and fully immersed in the work that you're doing. And it really just helps your sense of self-discipline if you can acknowledge what is distracting you and take the steps necessary to remove the distractions. And then finally, the last thing I think that you need to think about when it comes to your optimal working environment is how often you like to take breaks, right? So some people like to take breaks frequently, and some people like to take breaks after big chunks of work. I tend to like to take breaks after big chunks of work. I mean, there's no right or wrong with this. It's just acknowledging what your working style and what your working environment optimally would be, because we all have different needs, right? So think about how frequently you like to take breaks as well, because that's going to really end up helping you to decide the sorts of productivity strategies that we're going to talk about later that might work for you, right? If you're someone who likes to take frequent breaks, guess what? I got a suggestion for you later. If you're someone who likes to work through a few hours and then take a break, like a longer break, guess what? I got suggestions for that too. So just think about the optimal working environment that you need to become focused, okay? So, oops, hold on, missed something. So all of these factors will have an influence on the amount of self-discipline that you'll be able to exert. So make it as easy as possible for yourself and identify your optimal environment, the type of worker you are, and all that jazz, so that you can use that information to inform your planning, right? So that you're getting your planning done right, so you know that you're making the right choices for yourself ahead of time, and therefore can execute on a plan that's right for you. Okay, so now learning how to prioritize. Like we said, an awareness of your priorities is the second thing that you need in order to become productive and get your focus down. So priorities should be dictated by values and expectations. Okay, so when it comes to your values and expectations, specifically, what values to consider when prioritizing tasks and events, right? Because when it comes to our lives, all of us, I think, have so many different competing priorities. And a lot of times people need to know, like, what should I do first? Like, what's actually important, right? Well, your priorities are going to dictate that. And your priorities are dictated by your values and expectations. So the values that you want to consider when you're thinking about how to prioritize is, number one, your needs and goals, okay? So I think that first and foremost, you need to think what you need to accomplish and what your goals are, right? So if you're being bombarded by different projects or something like that at work, or people are asking you to, help them with this or that or the other thing, and you've got your own work on your plate, you've got your own thing to do that's really important to you right now, that means that, you need to say no or defer the people who are asking you for help, right? Because what you need to get done, what you need to accomplish really needs to come first. And like in the level of prioritization, you need to be your number one priority always. So when it comes to prioritization, your needs and your goals need to come first. Then of course, come the people in your life or in your workplace whose needs are important to you, okay? And a really good example of that would be like friends and family, right? So a good example of this would be if, let's say that you're at home and your sister calls you in the evening and it's time for you to put your kids to sleep, right? If your sister calls and you answer the phone, you'd probably tell your sister that you'll call her back because you need to get your kids to bed first, right? That's the priority. Putting the kids to sleep is more important than talking to your sister on the phone, right? I know that's a really very simple example, but it's probably something that many of us do all the time. We get a phone call from someone, even though it might be someone whose needs are important to us. In this situation, your children's needs and putting your kids to sleep are more of a priority than talking on the phone to your sister. You can call her back in a minute when you get the kids in their room, right? So that's a very simplified example of friends and family. And then of course, there are also superiors and coworkers who you'd want to consider, right? So an example for that would be if you're preparing for a presentation with a coworker, right? And your boss walks into your office and tells you that he needs a report done immediately for a sales call that he's getting on in 10 minutes. You would probably excuse yourself from the work with your coworker for a moment and get that report and deliver it to your boss. Why? Because although your boss and your coworker are both important, your boss is telling you, who is, your boss who, decides your job, right? He's telling you that he needs something in the next 10 minutes. So that for something that's important, right? So that is a situation where it's okay to excuse yourself from what you're already doing. Most likely with this presentation that you're preparing for, the presentation is not in 10 minutes, right? The presentation has a longer due date. So your boss is a little bit more important in this situation than your coworker, right? So does that make sense? I hope that these examples make sense to you. But that's an example of superiors and coworkers in your life, and of course, friends and family, people who will have a priority in your life to some extent, and you'll want to consider who those people are and who you value the most in order to prioritize the things that come into your life and the things that you need to accomplish. Okay, so That's values. Now, what about expectations? Okay, so what expectations should you consider when you're learning how to prioritize tasks and events? The first expectation you want to think about is the source, okay? So, is the source of your tasks or event that you're doing someone that you want or need to please, okay? The more important people in your life should get preference. So the more important someone is, they should be getting preference. But you also need to balance who you pay attention to so that you don't alienate or become one-sided. So a good example of this, going back to the example of your boss asking you for the report while you're preparing a presentation with your coworker. Your boss is probably, in the scheme of things, more important to your future career than your coworker. So you want to give them what they want, right? But if you're the kind of person who always is dropping exactly, whatever you're doing for your boss, number one, that's probably going to create, you may think that that's actually counterintuitive, but it's actually creating a situation where you're letting your boss create an expectation that you're just going to do whatever they say whenever they say it, which, yes, they're your boss and that's important, but you also need to establish boundaries that you have other work that you need to do as well that's also important. So obviously, you wouldn't want that report to take too long out of your time with your coworker, because you need to honor their time as well. Your coworker and you are preparing for a presentation that is probably just as important, right? So you want to make sure you don't become a one-sided person who becomes a people pleaser to like a boss and alienates your coworkers or leaves them high and dry when you're working on something. So that's something you want to consider. The source of where these tasks are coming from is the first thing you want to consider when it comes to expectations. The second thing you want to consider in terms of your expectations are the due dates for what you're working on, okay? So is what you are working on today, is that due today, or is it due tonight? Is it due tomorrow? Is it next week, next month? Because you're going to want to prioritize items and tasks with a closer due date so that you don't miss things that are currently on your plate. Again, going back to that example of your boss asking for a report, we're assuming that that presentation that you're working on with your coworker is later on, right? So however, if let's say the report that your boss wants for the sales call is the call that you're going to be doing your presentation on in 10 minutes, and your presentation isn't done yet, you're probably going to be in a situation where you need to decide who you're going to have to, what's more important to you, like what expectation is more important. And I would probably say that the presentation is more important. You could probably just say to your boss, like, look, we're getting on this call in 10 minutes and the presentation is not at 100% yet. Could you ask someone else to do the report? You just let them know what it is that the situation is, that you can't help them or whatnot. But thinking about the due date for what you're working on is important, because if something has a shorter due date, if something is more urgent, if it really has an urgent need, then you want to prioritize that, right? Like if, you've got like an event at the end of the year that you're, doing the party planning for or something like that, it's probably not as important as a call immediately, right? Like that's probably more important to you, because things that are further out, there's more time for you to accomplish tasks. So due date, very important. And the final expectation you want to consider when it comes to prioritization is time. So how long will this item or task take to accomplish? If a task is due later, but it takes longer to do, you may need to prioritize it, right? So let's say you're doing that presentation with your coworker and it's not in 10 minutes. Maybe the presentation is in an hour, but you've got a bunch of work you still need to do on it, right? Yes, your boss needs something within 10 minutes. So that seems like a higher priority because it's, the due date is closer, but you've got more work you have to do on the presentation that's a little bit further out. So that's probably going to take priority, right? And of course, you need to balance all three of these expectations, right? It's not about like what's the right or wrong answer. It's about balancing out the source, the due date, and the time that it's going to take for you to accomplish tasks. That's really why prioritization is so hard for people. It's not always a black and white. It's sometimes, most of the time, it's a gray area. And in order to, overcome that, right? In order to deal with priority conflicts, there are choices you have to make when it comes to managing those expectations, because very often 2 or more items will conflict during your day. So if you are the source of whatever your work is, right? You're the one who's putting the work together. You need to get realistic with the expectations you have for what you're going to be able to accomplish in a certain period of time, right? Or you may need to delegate tasks to manage your own workflow so that you can get everything done. But I think the big thing as well is that if you are not the source, right? Let's say, you know, that situation, going back to the situation with your boss and your coworker. If you can't help your boss right now because the presentation is more eminent, you've balanced, you know, the source, the due date, and the timing, and it's more important that you sit with your coworker. You need to be honest with others, and do not be afraid to say no if you have too much on your plate, if you have too much to do, because ultimately, like I said, it's just not a black and white area here with prioritization. It's hard. It's a lot of gray area. And the best thing that you could do for your boss in this situation, if you absolutely need to work on this presentation, is be honest and say, look, boss, me and so are finishing up this presentation. We're really in a crunch. Is there anyone else who can do the report? And I bet you your boss, if they're a good and kind boss who wants to see you succeed, because your success means their success, they'll probably acknowledge, yes, you're right, your presentation is more important. A lot of times I think it's just communication when you've got priority conflicts, letting the other people know, oh, I would love to help you, but I can't, I'm doing this right now. So can I help you later? Or is there anyone else that can help you? A lot of times people just don't know. They don't know what your schedule is. So if you say to your boss, hey, I'm in the middle of this thing with, you know, so-and-so, most likely your boss is, unless you're the only person who can run this report, most likely your boss is going to say, oh yeah, no problem, I'll go get someone else. You know what I'm saying? So just be honest with others, have open lines of communication. That's the best way that you deal with priority conflicts. And the more honest and open you can get with people, the easier it's going to become for you to like use these prioritization, you know, values and expectations to help you get really clear on what it is that you really need to do, right? So now we get to defining and tracking your measurable objectives, okay? We've talked about focus. We've talked about understanding your priorities. Now we're talking about defining and tracking measurable objectives. So in order to understand your rate of productivity, you need to have measurables or actual items that you can assess your productivity against. So tangible results that you will be delivering. So just some examples of this. This is obviously not all of the examples of measurable objectives, but it could be things like how many emails you respond to, how many projects you complete, how much income you make, how many followers you have gained, right? All of these things are objectives that you can measure your productivity against, right? If you could say like, oh, how productive was I with my business this year? Well, you may use your income to decide that, right? You can look at the income that you've made and decide, okay, I made more this year, so I must have been more productive, right? Or I gained more followers on my social media account this month than I did last month, which means maybe what I did this month was more productive than what I did last month. So defining and tracking measurables is super important so that you know exactly where you are and where you stand. So once you've defined which objectives matter to you, right? Because there's so many different objectives out there in the world, right? You could be like, if you're like a salesperson, right? Like maybe your objectives are going to be sales figures. There's going to be how many numbers of X you sold, or how many new customers you signed, or how many people you brought into an organization, things like that. So you need to define what objects are important to you in your situation, and then you need to track them. So I personally track my goals and my objectives with my project planning inserts and different tracking sheets. That's just how I work. That's what works for me. You can also use digital methods of planning and tracking and applications. We're going to talk about these things a little bit later. But the point here is that those who consistently track their measures have better results. And a really great example of this, actually, that I think many of you guys on this call today are going to really relate to is, we've all heard about Weight Watchers, right? So the concept with Weight Watchers is you get these points that relate to the nutritional value of the different food items that you're eating, and you stay within your points and you track your points. And the idea with Weight Watchers is when you watch your points, right? When you are measuring your objectives, you're tracking these measurable objectives. In the example of Weight Watchers, it is Weight Watchers points. When you're tracking them, people who do that consistently have better results. They lose more weight, right? Because when you pay attention, when you track objectives. You actually see your progress because you don't have blinders on. You can't just walk around with like your eyes, covered and your ears covered and say, oh, I didn't know how productive or non-productive I was being. When we shut off tracking, when we stop tracking, when we stop paying attention, we stop seeing success. So the point of the matter here is to make sure that you're constantly, consistently tracking your measured objectives, because when you do that, you're actually achieving more success, you're being more productive. And the final part of this is also reviewing your measures and tracking systems regularly. It's not enough that you just choose what your objectives are going to be and then track them. It is really important, I think, for you to constantly be reviewing your measures. So for me personally, I constantly review, the items that I'm using as my measurables, and I constantly review my systems of tracking and things like that, because if something isn't working, I want to know so I can change it immediately. It's not enough to track your measures. Like, let's go back to that Weight Watchers example because it's really simplistic. Yeah, let's say you're tracking your points, but you're always eating more than your points, right? Yes, tracking your points is important, but that's not the part that necessarily makes you successful. Reviewing the information that you've tracked to ensure that you are doing the right thing, that you're actually getting the results you want, is important. Because, if you eat like McDonald's, like 5 meals a day, on Weight Watchers, you're probably going over your points. Let's be honest. So if you're doing that every day and you're going over your points, yeah, you're tracking your points, but you're not staying within what your objectives are really. So reviewing the measures, making sure that they still are relevant, and making sure that you're looking at what you're tracking to make sure that it makes sense, that the numbers are what you want, because you can make tweaks and changes based on what you're seeing, right? So like I said, I like to constantly review to make sure everything is efficient and that I'm staying within my goals and, I'm on track. You also need to make sure your system is reliable, so that you use it, because, a system that isn't being, used is useless. It's great that you have project planning sheets in your planner, but if you're not actually using them, what's the point? And it may take time to get into the habit of tracking. So remind yourself, set alerts and take it slow. Don't feel like you need to go from 0 to 100 overnight. Just make sure that you're frequently looking at your system, frequently tracking as much as you can, and more you're going to start to use that muscle, and it's going to grow and it's going to become almost like second nature. But if you get out of the habit of tracking, if you get out of the habit of reviewing your measured objectives, you're going to lose it, right? Because productivity is not a one-time thing. It is like a muscle that you need to constantly use. But take it slow to begin with and, build up. It's not something that has to be done overnight. And some ideas for what you can do to remind yourself if you're someone who forgets to track or forgets to look at their objectives. Like I said, you can set an alarm. You could set some sort of alarm on your phone or on your computer, some sort of thing like that. You can leave yourself notes. I sometimes do that when I need to track things, or if I know I need to look at something, I'll leave myself a note, at the computer or wherever I might need to be, where I need to do something like track or something like that. And then you can also make tracking part of your daily routine, right? So you could say, anytime I get back from the bathroom, I'm going to do a quick update, right? So if you're someone who goes to the bathroom a few times a day, if you get into the habit, creating a routine where the trigger for tracking your measures is coming back from the bathroom, then you kind of are establishing a routine there. You're establishing a habit that will help you to become more reliable with your tracking. So those are just some tips for, getting better at your tracking, because that's the hard part too. You can have the whole system set up, but actually executing and tracking and making sure you're reviewing, that's probably the harder part, really. Okay, so those were the 3 elements you needed for productivity. Now we are on to part 2, which are the essential planning tools. So this is like a fun part, right? So like I said earlier, when it comes to planning tools, they can be digital, they can be paper, it does not matter. One is not necessarily better than the other. And I'm someone who definitely uses both. So when it comes to digital planning tools, I'm talking about things like apps, programs, software on your computer, a computer itself or a tablet, or even your phone itself. So these are all different tools that you can use for digital planning. And I'm always asked like for recommendations on different planning tools. And I do use a few, but ones that I know are very good as well, depending on what you have access to. Something like Microsoft Outlook. I know that that is something that a lot of people have access to. When I worked corporate 9 to 5, I used Outlook for a lot of planning. I did a lot of planning digitally through my calendar and through my email system, managing email invites to, events and conference calls and things like that. So Microsoft Outlook is a great planning tool if you have access to that. I think it does have like to-do lists. It definitely has calendars. You can set alerts, everything like that, which is pretty awesome. Another digital planning tool that I love and I've used, and I'm not using it currently, I go in and out with different digital planning tools sometimes. So OmniFocus, this is a program that I absolutely love, because when I'm using it, it just becomes so seamless. Digital is great because it can be seamless sometimes. OmniFocus is a computer program and it pairs to an app on my phone as well. So it makes it super convenient. It's like a really great to-do list, calendar, reminder sort of app where you can lay out different projects and different tasks, and you can batch them by different types and things like that. You can do so many different things to make your work more productive and more efficient. So I love OmniFocus for that. A really great free option that I feel like a lot of people underestimate is, Google's suite. So Google Calendar is absolutely wonderful. You can manage multiple schedules and things like that. And I was just talking to earlier someone who said that they're getting into managing employee schedules. Having a Google Calendar for each of your employees and being able to, look at them digitally on the computer is an excellent idea. And again, it's free and everybody has access to it. Like it's a very low barrier to entry. So your employees, if they've got like a Google account or maybe just an email account, you can like probably link their email to it so that they can see their calendar. So they see their schedule and you see it at the same time. So it's very seamless. It makes it very easy for people to know what they're expected to be doing and when they're expected to be working and, the to-do lists and things like that, because you can put it all into Google Calendar. Another app that always gets amazing reviews is Todoist. I've never personally used this, but anytime I talk to anybody about digital planning tools, I feel like this always comes up. So it's definitely something I think that's worth looking at, Todoist. It's, I think, an application. It probably has phone software as well. So it probably goes from like your computer, your tablet, your phone, super seamless. Some other digital planning tools that are specifically business related are Trello and Asana. You could use any of these, I think, for personal as well, but they're more project management based, I want to say. And I have more experience with Asana personally, but it's a program that I use with clients that you can break out projects and break out tasks, and you can actually assign different people different tasks, and it goes to their personal Asana account. So everybody is, aware of what their expectations are, aware of what they're supposed to be getting done, and it makes it very easy for you to track what you're doing. So whether you're working as part of a team, if you run your own small business, or you're just someone who just wants to have a project plan, project management, maybe just for yourself and like your family, you could use something like Trello and Asana as well. Like they work for, everybody. You don't have to, these tools are not just like business or personal. They can be both. So those are some ideas of digital planning tools. And like I said, there's different pros and cons to, digital versus analog planning tools. So when it comes to digital planning tools, I think that the pros are that they're very convenient, right? Because you've got them on your computer or on your tablet, on your phone, and most people have their phone with them at all times. So you always have your plans with you at all times. Another pro is that they're searchable, right? Normally you can just like search for things and it'll pop things up. If only we had that ability in our Filofaxes, like a search feature, make things so much easier. Digital planning tools tend to be very compact, obviously, because you already have your phone. It doesn't matter that you've got all of your plans and all your projects broken out because it's compact, it's all digital, like you're not feeling the difference. And I love digital planning tools because they give you the ability to have alerts and reminders, which are super helpful if you're someone who's very forgetful, or if you're someone who's trying to build a new habit, right? Or like build planning and productivity into your life. Having reminders and having alerts popping up is very helpful. Of course, though, digital planning tools have cons as well. Usually they're battery operated, which, stinks because, if the battery runs out, then you don't have your plans with you. I guess there's always a situation where your digital tools could crash, right? Like a phone could crash, an app could crash, and you lose information. That stinks. Although I feel like we're getting better with this, and like this new digital age, like cloud computing is kind of acting as a safety net for those situations. I also find too, when it comes to digital planning tools, it is sometimes hard to get a high level view. Usually you get a lot of different views within digital planning tools. For example, like the calendar app on my phone, I can look at things, I can look at like a whole month or a week or the day. So I can look at different views, but it's hard to get like a sense of all of it at once. You know what I mean? It's hard to get like a high level view sometimes with digital planning tools. So that's something to think about. If you're someone who likes to look at the big picture, like literally, I like to look at the big picture a lot. And I find that with digital planning tools as well, there tends to be a low info retention rate for the user. So, we've probably all heard that, when you write things down, you remember it, like when you physically write things down, but when you're typing, it doesn't have that same retention rate. So just like, something to think about when it comes to digital planning tools. And then of course, your analog planning tools. What are we talking about with your analog planning tools? Paper planners and calendar systems, right? What most of us on this call are using and love and have probably a wonderful love-hate relationship with, semi-addiction, right? So I'm talking about things like 6-ring binder systems like Filofax, KikiK, Daytimer, Franklin Covey, disc-bound systems like ARC, Tool, and the Happy Planner, spiral or coil-bound systems like the Day Designer, Erin Condren Life Planner, Inkwell Press planners, and then like book-bound things like Traveler's Notebooks, Moleskines, or even like just a notebook, you guys, like totally just use a notebook. So obviously these examples are not all inclusive. There's so many different planners out there in the market, you guys. I would never be able to include them all, but I tend to think of them in these 4 systems. So like binders, disc-bound, spiral, and book. Like that's how I think of them in my head. So when it comes to analog planning tools, I think the pros for those are that, like we said earlier, the data retention is higher for the user. Why? Because you're physically writing things down. And just study after study after study shows when you're actually writing things down, you end up remembering more. Yes, you've got it written down, which is good, so you don't have to remember, but you learn better when you're actually writing things down. And like I said too, but earlier, like you can see more views, I feel like, with paper planners. Now, of course, it depends on what your system is, right? Like if you only have a day on a page in your planner, then you're only going to get that view. But especially with customizable systems like binders, disc bounds, etc., you're able to see a whole bunch of views and you can almost like lay them all out in front of you. You know what I mean? Like you can just pull out the views and look at them and see them all at once, which is something that I think can give you a higher level view or a higher level big picture understanding of like what your responsibilities and your projects and your tasks are, if that's something that's important to you. Kind of important to me. Another great pro, no batteries required, so it doesn't die on you. You always have it. And I find that they're more versatile. You can put a lot of different things inside of planners. And yes, there are great digital planning tools like for everything, but I feel like it means you just have to download more apps, more software, more things in order to get full versatility. Yes, within your planner, you have to buy different things to get full versatility, but it's all still in like one place. You know what I mean? I feel like it's all one. It's like if you think of your planner as one app, one physical app, it's all in one place, right? As opposed to maybe having information on your phone in multiple different apps. Yes, it's all in your phone, but it's in multiple different places. So, just things to consider. And of course, analog planning tools have cons as well. Number one can be the size, right? Your planner is definitely bigger than your phone is. My planner is definitely heavier than my laptop is, let's be honest. So the size, they can be pretty bulky. They do require attention, which, stinks. You always have to remember to go look in them. They don't have like alerts and reminders, although I get around this by setting alerts and reminders sometimes to look at my planner. Something you can do to go do that. And they don't have an automatic backup system, like there's no cloud, like obviously. And you need to be careful with them because if you lose your planner or you spill coffee all over it, you may have ruined your plans. So, I mean, I try to get around this by, like, if I have important plans that are written down on paper, I will take a picture with my phone and I will keep that picture. Some people keep it in Evernote, but you know, I'll save it to my camera roll or put it up in like iCloud or something like that, so that I've got the picture as reference. So if something were to happen to the, you know, the plan page, I don't have to start from scratch, because that could be a pain in the butt. The big thing though, when it comes to choosing the digital versus the analog planner, right? Nothing really, I think it's whatever planner system works for you, right? I think that that's really what it comes down to. You have to pick what works for you. I personally use digital and analog planning tools together. Remember, your planner is yours. There are no rules for how to use it. You do what you see fit. So don't feel like you need to have a certain planner system to be productive. It's all relative. Like, to be completely honest with you guys, I know I sell like my planner, the Charmed Life Planner, and that's what I used. You don't need my planner to be as productive as I am, or to be more productive than I am. It's not so much about the tools as it is about how you use them. So pick what works for you and your lifestyle. So on this topic of planning systems, what is it that we're actually going to be using our planner for, right? If you have been following me, you know that my big thing when it comes to planning is functional planning, right? So we're actually looking at our planning and making sure that we are planning things out, mapping things out in terms of our schedule, where we need to be, you know, what we're going to be doing, tasks, what we actually have to work on throughout the day, project planning, right, where we've got these big goals and objectives that we want to hit, and we break them down into measurable steps into a project plan. And then the last part of like functional planning is, you know, tracking and organizing information. Like we said earlier, tracking is a really big part of, you know, knowing whether or not you're getting things done and, you know, hitting your goals. So tracking and organizing information also is something that I do in my planner. And alternately, and I have this in here just because I know that people, I have to nod to it. Even though it's not something I do like to give a nod to the fact that people often use planners for memory keeping as well. Now, that's not going to be the whole focus of the rest of this video, of this masterclass, but it is something that people use their planner for. And I think that it is, I think for me, it has a time and a place. And I'll say that. And we're going to kind of look at that a little bit in a minute. So let's break down these different elements. So when it comes to scheduling events, what you're looking at right here is a just example of a spread in my Charmed Life Planner. This is from January 2017, right? And I've filled in, you know, what scheduling events would look like in your planner, right? So on your month on 2 pages, you might put like, oh, I've got a birthday party on Saturday at 12. My payday is on the 5th and the 19th this month. I've got a vet visit at 3 p.m. Like, you're using your planner to schedule out things that need to happen, events that you have in your life. So this is just an example of what that would look like. Task management, right? Again, the Charmed Life Planner, it has a master monthly task list for every month of the year. So it's where you can actually list out the tasks that you want to work on in a given month, right? So that's how you can look at your task management in your planner. If we combine that, like creating daily schedules and tasks, right? If you look at your weekly pages, so wherever you're keeping information for your day to day, this is an example of a week on 2 pages. So we've got like my top 3 every day for what I need to work on. And then I have other sorts of lists like my top 5 projects, a schedule for the day. You can see on the Tuesday, it says like today, and I've got like times with like different items broken out. You could just have a to-do list, like a running to-do list, like we've got an example of that on a Wednesday. So this is just examples of how you can use your planner to create your daily schedule and manage your tasks so that you are mapping everything out. You've got your plan in place so that you can execute productively. Project planning. Here's my project planning sheets. Just a really loose example of a project plan. You know, you've got your goal, what it is that you're doing, a description of what you're trying to accomplish, the due date for it, super important with project planning to actually know when the project is due, right? Then we've got a list of action steps and resources as well. And of course, my project planning pages always have notes on the back, so you can take notes about your project or whatever else you need to write down. But this is an example of project planning, how that would look in your planner. And then what I like to do is I take the action steps on my project plan and I put them into the monthly master task list for the month that they belong to, based on, you know, how long-term your project plan is for. And then, of course, tracking and organizing information. The picture on the left is an example of like a yearly tracker page I have that, it's like a year at a glance. That's like a trifold that you can put in your planner. It's great for tracking things like vacation days, like days off, things like that. It's great for tracking sort of like reoccurring things. Like, some people use these sorts of trackers for health, right? So they might track their weight, or they might track their cycle, right? Or they may track when they have migraines, or if they're not feeling well, or things like that. There's so many different things that we can track. I've used this sort of tracking page before for billable hours for client work. So it's all up to you the way that you want to track, but you can be tracking inside of your planner. And the picture on the right is just an example of how I organize information. So the information organized here are some blog posts. This is just like a blog post insert that I sell on my shop. And you can see I've got like blog posts, titles, and I've got different areas like check boxes for, has the post been written, edited, are there images, and is it scheduled up on my site? So that's information that I'm organizing. Blog posts. I'm literally keeping all of my blog posts organized in one place in my planner, et cetera, et cetera. So these are just some examples for how you would track or organize information. And of course, like I said before, that whole memory keeping element. I can't say that I'm totally against memory keeping with your planner, but I would say that when it comes to memory keeping, we've got, the picture on the left, we see like these holiday stickers where you can actually, put some things in your planner that help you celebrate certain important events. In this situation, it was like Thanksgiving and Christmas and things like that. And the picture on the right is an example of like one of my free monthly to-do lists that I put out, which, very strongly, those are memory keeping devices. They're an insert where, you can check off things that you're doing within a month that might be, seasonally themed. And in a way, you're keeping a memory, right? You've got that paper memory recorded in your planner. So again, although I'm not really into pretty planning, and I'm not someone who keeps a planner just for memory keeping, it is something that many of us do incorporate because at the end of the year, in many ways, your planner is almost like a scrapbook of your year. So, if you do a little bit of intentional pretty planning, you can do some memory keeping in your planner. So how to choose the right planner for you, because this is a question that I get asked a lot. And I know that I've gone through so many different planners. And like I talked about earlier, I have 4 main categories of planners that I consider. So binders, discs, spirals, and bookbound. So what style is it that works for you? That really just comes down to what your needs are, right? I love binder planners and Filofaxes and things like that because they're customizable. And I love disc bounds for that reason too. I predominantly use a disc bound planner because I can flip it over on myself, right? So that's always great. A binder is great because it's highly customizable. You can take things in and out. The disc bound planner is great because you can customize it and it flips over on itself like a notebook, which I love. The spiral planner is great because it's bound, so you don't have loose pages that might fall out. Also, again, it flips over on itself. So for some people, some people like that, to be able to, just have one page at a time that they're looking at. And then the book bound is great often because the book bound planners are compact. And again, they're bound, so things are not falling out. Like in a Filofax, I guess theoretically, because the pages are removable, or in a disc bound, because the pages are removable, you could lose a page, right? I guess is what could happen. So spiral and book bound, yes, you could still pull pages out. It's probably just harder though. So, I mean, those are the things that I think about when it comes to the actual binder of the planner that I'm using, is those categories. And of course, we also have, this conversation of what size planner do you need, right? Because there are so many different sizes, and by no means is this slide all inclusive. Again, there are so many different planners out there. And unfortunately, as the planners, the planner community has gotten like so big and out of control, I feel like there's more and more retailers that are creating their own like proprietary sizes that don't necessarily line up with our traditional sizes that are usually pretty interchangeable. But when it comes to the size of planners, what you're looking at here, and these are just some different, just like visuals to help you kind of see the difference in sizes. There's A4, In binder sizes, there's A4, which is like a full letter, A5, which is like half, a personal size, and a pocket. Those are like the common Filofax, quote unquote, sizes. And then we've got like US planner sizes. So we've got US letter. I call the common coil bound, which is usually, Erin Condren, Day Designer. I think Inkwell Press might also fit into this category. They've got their own specific sizing as well. That's all very close. Again, some of these are a little bit off. Like I don't think an Erin Condren is exactly the same size as a Day Designer, but they're roughly the same. And half letter, of course, as well. So these are just some examples of different sizes, but things that you want to consider when it comes to the size of your planner and really why size matters. You want to consider your handwriting size, because if you're someone who has very large handwriting, it finds it hard to write smaller, you may need bigger pages, right? So your handwriting matters. The number of events and tasks you have each day is going to matter, because a smaller planner is only going to be able to house so much, unless we're talking about you going into like day per page or a day on 2 page, in which case you'll have more space in your planner, but you're not going to be able to keep like a full year worth of calendar pages in there, for example. So thinking about the number of events and tasks you have each day, very important for helping you to decide the size of your planner. The places that you're going to be using your planner. So like, do you have to take your planner with you everywhere? Like if you're someone who travels a lot, like when I used to work for corporate 9 to 5, I had a territory and I drove around. So I needed a planner that was a little bit more portable, because I would take it in with me to meetings and all that jazz. So where are you going to be using your planner? If you're just using it at your house, like I am now, I use a bigger planner now because it sits on a desk. Like I don't carry it around with me. Another thing to think about, which is kind of silly, but this is so important for women, the size of the bag that you carry. So if you're someone who carries a giant tote bag, right? Like you have the big mom bag, then you can afford to put the A5 planner in there. Like a full-size planner, if it fits in your bag, then yeah, you could probably carry around the bigger one. Now, weight is a totally another thing here. Obviously, bigger planners mean more weight. But if you're someone who carries a smaller purse, like I carry a smaller bag, I would say, like a medium to smaller bag, my planner doesn't fit in it, like not my A5. But I think I could fit a personal size planner in there if I so choose to, but I don't necessarily want to do that. But the size of the bag you carry can have an effect on what size planner you should choose. I know it's silly, but it's things that ladies think about. And of course, you want to think about convenience. What actually will work more for you? Is it more convenient that your planner be small and portable, or is it more convenient for you to be able to stuff it and have this huge, big, full-size planner? It's really coming down to what works for you, right? That's how you choose the size that works for you. And honestly, the best example I could give to you guys about this is, just start using what you think will work. And if it doesn't work, you can always change it, right? You can always get a different planner or binder or whatnot, and see if that size of a different size works for you, right? This is not like you get one planner and that's it. You have choice in this, right? So you can always change things if it's not working. Okay, now let's talk about calendar styles and how to use each, because I know that these are important things to think about when it comes to your planning, okay? So just like on a very high level view, the highest view that I feel like you can get in a planner is a year at a glance. So when it comes to year at a glance pages, and this is an example of a year at a glance page that comes from my project planning bundle. And earlier you saw that year at a glance tracker. A year at a glance is great for reference and tracking, right? Because you are not able to get tons of information. If you're putting a full year's of information on one spread, one page, ultimately, you're not going to get tremendous detail from that. So it's great for just seeing that high-level overview, for referencing important information that might be related to certain time periods or things like that, and of course, tracking, like I showed you the tracker before. Then comes the month at a glance, right? So here's an example of a month on 2 pages spread. You already kind of saw that spread earlier as well. I think month at a glance is great for tracking all day events and reminders and reoccurring tasks, the way I showed you earlier for using it as a scheduler, because generally the boxes are not big enough for you to like put like a full like 18-hour schedule into them. That's something that you would save for like a daily or like a weekly page. Month in a glance, I think, is great for all day events, things that you need to be reminded of, and reoccurring tasks, right? And you can also like, there's, you know, for this one you're looking at here, there's a notes section. There's places where you can write other things, but you know, generally the space is not something where you're going to be mapping out your entire day in every one of the little boxes. Next, week at a glance. And this is an example of one of my Charmed Life planners, the full size, full letter size one. That's a week on 2 pages, a little bit of a different layout, I think, than most people are used to for a week at a glance. But as you can see, it's great for tracking your tasks, like to-do list and your general schedule. Specifically, this insert has like an area for meal planning and a market list. So, you know, you have a lot of different things that you could be tracking on a week at a glance insert like this. And when we're talking about this full size, like look how big that planner is, like in comparison to the keyboard or the glasses or something. Like it's a big planner. You're getting a lot in there. You've got plenty of room to put everything you need. Then of course there are daily pages. So day on one page, and this is my, I think it's called the daily day timer in my shop. It's one of the ones that I sell. You know, it's got enough room for you to make a full day's plans. Like it's got an area for you to put like a top 3 for the day, a schedule, like a 16, I think this is a 16-hour schedule here, a nice big task list. So you can write down a whole bunch of to-dos. You can put reminders, you can put a gratitude or a quote or something on there, something inspirational. You can put your meals for the day, whatever you want. Generally, daily pages are great for adding more detail. So like go back and compare, you know, the detail that you're going to get on a month at a glance versus what you're going to get on a daily page. You're able to fit so much more on daily pages. And this is even half letter, right? So this is half the size of this week at a glance page, but you're getting so much more information because you're looking at every day is a page. So just things to keep in mind. Other sorts of inserts, for example, this one is project planning. We already kind of got a look at project planning as well. These are great for breaking down projects into tasks and keeping them on schedule. So you can see here, like this is my bundle that has the project planning sheet that we already looked at. It's got that year at a glance project plan, project tracker, which is like that fold out. And then you can see an example of like a monthly calendar page where you can schedule in what days different projects are due or different project elements or tasks are due and keep like a running to-do list. So this is just another example of how you can arrange and organize information within a paper planner. And let's not forget pretty planning. Like I said, it can be a way that you can also add memory keeping to your planner. Pretty planning, if you're not familiar with the term, is when you incorporate elements of decor into your planner while keeping it functional. And this is just like an example you can see here of like a planner of mine where, you know, we've got stickers in there. We've got like meeting stickers. We've got like event things. And, you know, because I've got some pretty stickers in there, it looks pleasing, right? You can look at this and say, oh, information's been organized and I'm memory keeping and it's attractive. And for a lot of people, pretty planning is what they like to do because when things are pretty, we tend to want to use them more, right? We like things that we're attracted to. So just something for your consideration, incorporating elements of decor can help you to memory keep and, you know, use your planner if that's what will motivate you to use your planner. Just some basics of pretty planning, because I'm not the biggest pretty planner. You guys know that. I'm a functional planner. I really don't use very many stickers or anything like that in my plans. But some basics, if you're someone getting started, you can use things like washi tape to block off time or highlight an event. I always think that that's really cool when you actually like time block with washi tape. That can look really cool in your planner. Like if you're going away on vacation and you've got like a month at a glance, you can like put some really pretty vacation themed washi over like a long weekend or a week off or whatever it is. And it looks nice. It's a way to visually block off information. You can use stickers to mark events. So, you know, you could, here in this picture we're looking at here, there's a phone. There's like a little phone on one of the stickers. So if you had to make a phone call, you could use the phone sticker and put like the phone number or the name of the person that you're supposed to call. So it just helps you to have information stick out in your planner and to organize your information a little better, and it becomes a little bit more inspirational. And something I really don't do because I'm not really this artistic, but I've seen other people do this beautifully, is using sketching or art journaling to mark important memories visually. So, you know, if you have some space left over in your planner and you want to draw a little picture of something that happened in your day, absolutely. That's a beautiful way to keep memories and do some memory keeping and pretty planning at the same time. But of course, I like to always remind everyone when it comes to pretty planning, it's wonderful if it works for you, but if it's stopping you from actually being productive, that's a problem. So keep that in mind. Pretty planning is good to an extent. Okay, now finally, we're getting to part 3. Now we're getting into the deep stuff, the actual deep strategy here, which is mastering fundamental productivity strategies. I hope you guys are ready for this. We got a lot to cover here. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about in these productivity strategies are productive planning tips. So how to be a productive planner, okay? And I think the first tip I've got for you on that front is to become a list master, right? So I talked about earlier that productivity is not just having a to-do list, right? But I did say that having a to-do list, you know, a to-do list could be used as a tool to become productive. And when it comes to productivity in planning, I think having lots of different lists can be helpful. Not too many lists, but there are certain essential lists that I think can be helpful to people. Number 1 is the daily top 3 list. So if you're someone who is familiar with my planning, and I'll actually go back really quickly to let you take a look at this spread here. This is the Charmed Life Planner. It's just bound as a book. You can see at the top of every day are check boxes with 3 items, okay? So that is the daily top 3 list. And in terms of finding focus, if you're someone who struggles to find focus, the daily top 3 list can be very helpful because you are basically thinking about your day and saying, if there are just 3 things I could do today, what would they be? Like if there are 3 things I absolutely had to do, what would they be? And you write those down, and if you can accomplish those, then you've got the 3 most important things of your day taken care of. That's productive. No matter how much else you get done, that's productive because you've taken care of 3 important things. You've prioritized. So that's really, you know, folding in a few different concepts, focus and prioritization, and you're writing it down so you're tracking it. So that's just being so totally, completely productive there, isn't it? Then another list we've got here is the weekly top 5 list. So my weekly top 5 list, this concept is I choose 5 projects that I want to focus on for the week. And why 5? Because there's 5 work days in a week, generally speaking. You know, some people work 7 days a week, but generally speaking, there's 5. So, you know, if that's too many for you, if you wanted 3 projects for the week to focus on or 1, whatever it is that works for you, but this concept of having a clear focus on what you're going to be working on for the entire week. So we talked about what's going to be important for the day, what's going to be important for the week. That's its own list in and of itself. Then we've got the monthly task list, like I showed you earlier, monthly master task lists, having a place to write down all of the things you're expecting yourself to do in 1 month. Very important, because sometimes we make these out of control lists that just have so many different things that belong to totally different months or different time periods that are not immediately actionable to us or are not really a high priority. So I think that by breaking down your task lists monthly, I think it gives you a little bit more focus because then you can use the master monthly task list to inform your weekly top 5, and you use your weekly top 5 to inform your daily top 3, and it all sort of trickles down in its own system. Of course, you also want to make sure you're keeping a list of projects. So I've got like my project plans in my planner, right? And having like a list of them, knowing what projects you're working on, super diligent, super productive. And then of course, there's other things that you can list out as well, like grocery lists, you know, gifts that you want to buy for people, blog posts. Like I showed you earlier, I was organizing that list of blog posts earlier. The point here is that if you're someone who writes things down, makes the list, right? You have the information organized so that you can act on it. But I don't want you to get to the point where you have so many lists that it becomes overwhelming. You don't want to have like 7,000 lists that you have to check every day. Keeping it very streamlined, knowing like, this is what I'm doing, my top 3 today for the day. This is what I'm doing for the week. This is what I'm doing for the month. These are the projects. And then maybe a few other sort of lists that you'll just look at as needed. I think that's a great way to manage your tasks so that you always know what you need to be doing so that you're being productive, okay? So that's tip number 1, become a list master. Now, tip number 2 for being productive is to incorporate project planning. I cannot stress to you guys how important project planning really is to my productivity. Now, when it comes to project planning, I break out projects into short-term, midterm, and long-term projects, okay? So I've got short-term is like usually a month or less, midterm is like a quarter, and then long-term for me is like 6 months to a year, right? So I break out my projects based on those time frames. And I set objectives for what I'm doing and why I'm doing it and the time frame for the completion. Like you guys saw earlier on the project planning sheet, project planning sheets are great. You can break out what it is you're doing, what you're trying to accomplish, the time frame, the actual tasks that you're going to need to do to accomplish the project. And, you can list out any other information you need. The big thing you need to remember when it comes to project planning, or at least the way that I like to look at it, is that I don't like to have any more than 3 projects going on at one time. Yes, I may break out projects for the entire year, but I only work on 3 at one time. And I don't mean like sitting at one time, like the same hour of the day. I just won't have my focus on more than 3 at one time. So I need to make sure that I get through, the first 3 before I move on to the next 3. Do you see what I'm saying? I don't like to have my focus in too many places, especially in a time frame. So like if, let's say I'm working, like we're in May right now. So I will normally have 1 short-term, 1 midterm, and 1 long-term project at one time. But I guess what you could do is you could do 3 short-term, 3 midterm, and 3 long-terms for each term of the year, breaking that out. So the point here is just not to put your focus in too many places. Try to streamline it so that you're getting, things done effectively. Okay. Another productive planning tip for you is to use your planner as your second brain, okay? And what I mean when I say that is to write everything down. This is a habit that I think that people really need to get into if you're a planner person, because we tend to like to think that we can hold information in our brain, but it doesn't really work out that well because we tend to forget. We're not machines, we're just people. We can't always remember everything that we remember, right? So when you get into the habit of writing things down, you become more productive because you see the information and you're able to reference it. So use your planner, like actually use it, write things down. Do not be afraid to write things down and then have to erase or, white things out. Like there's always ways to get around things. So write things down, even if you're not 100% sure of it, because that's how you will not miss things. I can't tell you how many times I've missed just silly little details that were so crucial because I didn't write it down. Now, another part of this is a really big, it's a really essential productivity strategy that I do is brain dumping regularly. And if you've never heard this concept before, I call it brain dump. Some people call it a mental download. Essentially, it's when you sit down with a pen and paper and write down all of the things that you're holding on to in your brain. So all the things you're trying to remember, you write it down onto paper, and then you can organize the information and choose to act on what's important and choose to defer or delegate or delete what's not important, right? But the point is that your planner should be your second brain. You shouldn't be holding information in your brain for plans. Plans should be in your planner. Like details for plans should be in your planner. Like they shouldn't be just sitting in your head because your head is not reliable. Like your brain is just not reliable. So brain dump regularly. I like to do like a monthly brain dump, but I'm known to do them very often. Like I could do them on a weekly basis. Some people do them every day. Depends on how much incoming information you get on a regular basis. And of course, the important part of having a planner is that you actually are seeing and reviewing the information. So make sure you're regularly reviewing your plans in your planner. Again, your planner as a second brain is a great concept, but if you're not reviewing the information, just like when you're not remembering information in your head, It doesn't become useful unless you see it and know that it's there. So get into the habit of regularly reviewing your planner. Another productive planning tip I've got for you is not to fear white space, okay? So I feel like in the planner community, this concept of white space, some people think of this in terms of pretty planning, like literally having white space on your pages. And then I really think of this as on a productivity note from a friend of mine named Anne, who is a fellow entrepreneur. She actually wrote a book called The White Space Solution. And what that book was about, and I do believe that it's in your resource guide, is the importance of leaving room and having white space in your schedule as a buffer. And that will help you to become a more productive and successful person. Because when you leave room in your schedule as a buffer, just in case things pop up, right? Or things take longer than expected, right? Because things always change or things always pop up in our lives. So if you have the room, if you're not literally scheduling every minute of your day down to like the second, if you leave some room in your schedule, you have that buffer there. You've got the wiggle room, you've got the white space, and in case someone pops out of nowhere and asks for your help, or in case something takes longer than expected, or in case like an accident happens and you lose all your work or whatever, you have time built in. You're not fully in a crunch. And I think that that can be very helpful. I also, on this topic of white space that I really learned very heavily from Anne in her book is, planning for downtime is so important because you can't always be go, 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 right? So having downtime in your life, in your day, in your schedule is important, even if it means literally blocking out time and saying, you know what, from 5 to 7 tonight, I'm going to do nothing. I'm just going to chill. Yes, you didn't, you're not achieving something super productive. You're not working on your projects or whatnot. You're not getting work done. However, you're building in time for you to decompress. And in a way, that's like self-care, right? Just having decompression time is self-care, and self-care is very important for physical preparation, which is very important for you finding focus. So planning for downtime, so important. Make sure you're regularly planning self-care time in, just times for you to relax and chill and vegetate. You don't always have to be go, 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 go. It's not always good to be go, 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 go. We don't want to be busy, right? Go, 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 go is busy bee. We don't want to be busy bee. Busy bee drives themselves crazy and then has a very short lifespan because they've been so high strung. Okay. And the final point I want to make on this is that productivity isn't always about having things to do. It's about doing the things that matter and ignoring what doesn't matter, right? So like I said earlier, if you were to have a magic spyglass and you could see me all day long, I'm not doing something super productive at every hour of the day, right? Being productive is not about being busy and being occupied. It's just about making sure you're executing on the things that matter. And you know what the flip side of this really is that if you build in a lot of white space, if you become a person who is able to prioritize what matters and say no to things that don't matter, right? Not only are you becoming a more productive person, but it actually is very motivating in and of itself, because if you're not someone who's overwhelmed by the go, 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 go of life, and you actually are able to take it slow, you're less likely to procrastinate. You're less likely to have issues executing, because if you only had if your to-do list was much smaller, you'd probably be more inclined to actually get it done. I think that a lot of times, like I said earlier, having giant to-do lists is scary. It's overwhelming. That already kind of throws people off. It messes with your mental preparation and stops you from being able to get focused. So remember that I think that an essential part of this is white space, and the fact that productivity is not about always doing things, but it's about making sure you're doing the things that actually affect the results. That's more important. Now, I want to share with you guys some excellent productivity strategies that I actually use. So these are actionable items that I like to use, and they all have different situations. And like I said, based on the type of maybe worker you are, if you're a marathoner or a sprinter or a procrastinator, maybe different strategies are going to work for you. And obviously the different types of work that you do in your life, what your work is going to be different than what my work is. So think about these in terms about what makes sense. You don't have to use all of these. This isn't you have to use every one of these strategies to be productive. I certainly don't use all of them all the time. Certain ones will lend themselves to certain people. So think about this next section in terms of what makes sense to you and the way you work. So the first productivity strategy that I like to use is this concept called Parkinson's Law. Parkinson's Law says that work expands to fill the time allowed for its completion. I'm going to say that again because this is like very profound. Work expands, and I should also say alternately, or contracts, expands or contracts to fill the time allowed for its completion. What does this mean? This means that if you're someone who, let's say you are working on a project and you're going to give yourself an hour to do research. You're going to say, okay, I'm going to set an hour for doing some research on this project. The research that you're doing you're physically going to use that hour, but what the results could be less than an hour's worth of work, or it could be 3 hours worth of work, depending on like the research that you need to get done. Because in Parkinson's Law, essentially, you're going to fill up the time that you are allotting, so that it doesn't matter if you are being less productive or more productive, the time is going to be used. So does that make sense? And the way that you want to use this really is to schedule tasks instead of using the concept of like someday maybe, right? So I know a lot of us are like, we'll make our to-do list during the day and we won't actually say when we're going to work on X or Y during the day. So we'll just be like, oh, it's like whenever, I'll get to it whenever, or I'll get to it, later or someday, or maybe I'll do this today. Well, if you're not scheduling things, most likely you're A, not going to get them done, or B, you're going to take too long to get them done. So let me give you a better example than the research, because the research was a little bit silly. Okay, here we go. Let's say you need to clean your bedroom, okay? And let's say you've got like a standard size bedroom, right? Nothing too crazy. Standard bedroom. You need to clean your bedroom. If you give yourself an hour to clean your bedroom, you will clean it in an hour. If you give yourself 15 minutes, you will clean it in 15 minutes. And you might be thinking, well, Alexis, I could do a better job in an hour than I could in 15 minutes. Maybe that's true, or you'll just work at a slower pace and fill the time that you're allowing. Do you see what I'm saying there? So in Parkinson's Law, work will actually expand or contract to fit the time allowed for its completion. So you want to make sure that you're scheduling things. A is what you want to do to actually use that. And B, you want to make sure that you're setting reasonable time limits on what you're working on. Don't give yourself the quote unquote all day to work on something, because if you give yourself all day to send that one email or make that one phone call, guess what you're going to be doing at the last minute of the day? You're going to be making that phone call or sending that email. So schedule things in more often, right? If something's important, it actually needs to get done, schedule it. Say, I'm going to make that phone call at 10 a.m. instead of at some point today, I'm going to make that phone call. And set reasonable time limits. I know that for a lot of us, we may try to set a time limit and we go overboard, like we will go over our time allotted. It's probably better that you err on the side of setting a shorter time frame and have white space built into your day as a buffer than it is to give yourself too much time, and then you'll actually take the full time and it'll be a waste of time. Do you see what I'm saying? So that's how you execute on Parkinson's Law. Next productivity strategy that I absolutely love, and this actually kind of relates back to Parkinson's Law too. I'll actually give you guys an example, is the 80-20 rule. So the 80-20 rule states that 20% of your tasks create 80% of your end result. Okay, so let's think about how productive you are in a day, all the things you get done in a day. According to the 80-20 rule, 20% of what you did today is going to have 80% of the impact on your day, which means that you did 80% of what you did was only 20% of your day. Like, do you see how crazy that is? That really there's a small percentage of what it is that you're actually doing that's really having an effect on the end result. Going back to the Parkinson's Law example with the 15-minute room clean versus the hour room clean, and saying, oh, in an hour I could do a better job cleaning my room. Well, guess what? Even if you spent that full hour and you were working at the same pace as you were with the 15-minute cleaning, so you're technically getting 4 times the things done. You're being 4 times as thorough, I guess. Technically, 80% of what you did in your room didn't actually affect the cleanliness of it anyway. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, what you did in that 15 minutes anyway could have just been the cream of the crop, the most important things that you needed to do, like picking up clothes off the floor and making the bed. Like, yeah, maybe in an hour you can vacuum and clean your windows and maybe reorganize your sock drawer. But that 20%, there's 20% of that maybe you were doing in the 15 minutes that were really all that really counted. It was all that was really necessary to give you the best result. And this is one of those things that when I talk about being more successful, doing less work, and why I love the concept of working smarter, not harder, it really has to do a lot with the 80-20 rule. Because in terms of productivity, for me, I will make sure that I am identifying the essential 20% of what I need to get done and just do that. Like, I will do the 20% and have an 80% result instead of doing 100% and getting the 100% result. Because I feel like the difference between like 80 and 100, yes, I'm not hitting perfect, but I'm still getting in a majority of the effort first. And then if I choose to, then I can add some extra tasks that might bring me up to like 90% or something like that. But that is why I think a lot of people struggle with, busyness versus productivity, because we think that doing more means we're going to get better results, when really the truth of the matter is that very little of what we're actually doing is really affecting the end result of anything we're actually working on. So how do we actually use the 80-20 rule to be productive? What I would say is you want to first and foremost, when you're getting to work, create a prioritized task list with the essential 20% listed first. So if you were to make a to-do list for the day and you see everything that you could do, in many ways, this is the concept of choosing the top 3, right? So let's say you've got a list of 10 things to do and you choose 3 of those things and you're like, these are the 3 that have to be done first, or come hell or high water, these need to be done by the end of the day. Those things are probably the most important things that you actually have to get done. And that in many ways is about 20%. Probably if you've got a list of 10 things and you chose 3, that's 30%, but you see where I'm getting at here. You want to make sure that you're prioritizing which tasks are more important. You want to have tasks be more weighted because certain things are going to be more important and they're going to have a bigger effect. And those things really need to be done first. And then you can spend the rest of your time dilly-dallying with everything else that adds just that little bit, the little 20% extra. Another thing that I would say to help you be really productive with the 80-20 rule is to ask yourself why constantly. Like, why are you doing what you are doing? So many of us are actually just sort of trained on autopilot based on our routines that we've been living in our lives, like day in and day out, that we do things very often that really don't have a purpose. Or there is a purpose, but it really isn't moving the needle much. You know what I mean? It's just something that you always do out of habit. So if you're constantly evaluating why you're doing things, right? Like, why do I do X? Why am I doing Y, right? It doesn't mean that you have to eliminate the things that eliminate everything, but at least you're getting really clear on why you're doing something. Because I think many of us just kind of autopilot do things without thinking about it, and we don't really weigh whether or not it's the best use of our time. So if you're asking yourself, why am I doing this? And you don't just ask yourself once, like, you have to ask yourself continuously, right? Because you might do something one week that makes sense, but then if you do it another month, like a month later, it might not make sense at that point, right? It might be useless at that point because you've maybe gotten into a routine that you haven't broken out of, and now it's a useless task that you're doing. So just ask yourself why as often as you can, because the point of 80-20 rule is really is to ruthlessly eliminate busy work. So if you do find that you can't get a good why to why you're doing something, then it needs to be eliminated. It's just busy work. It's just something that you're doing out of routine, out of habit. And I will say that definitely, like, when I worked in corporate 9 to 5, geez Louise, 80-20 rule is so real, it's not even funny. And I would just find so often that people would assign me tasks, or I'd have things that I was expected to do that I would look at and say, there's absolutely no need for me to do this. And so I would just not do it. And the funny thing would be that like it would take people a very long time to realize I wasn't doing it, because guess what? Like they weren't even noticing because what I was doing was useless. So it's really important to always evaluate why you're doing things, and don't be afraid. You know, it's one thing when it's our own personal tasks and we're cutting it out, but when it's work related or it's related to somebody else, if you don't see a need for it, if it doesn't make sense, bring it up to the person. Like say to them, like, hey, you know, you don't have to be mean about it, but just be like, say like, hey, does this really make sense for us to do this? I'm not seeing the real value here. Would it be better for me to spend my time doing this instead of that? You know what I'm saying? So every time you save yourself, it's almost like a penny saved is a penny earned. Every minute you save from doing busy work, right? You are able to apply somewhere else. So really think about it that way, that it really is a value proposition here with what you're putting in versus what you're getting. And the 80-20 rule teaches us that really only 20% of what we're putting in is giving us 80% of the value. So why are we wasting our time with 80% of our day that is only giving us 20% of the results? Okay, next productivity strategy that I love, okay, and this one is going to be great if you're someone who is a sprinter, right? If you're someone who's a sprinter, or you're someone who your job or the tasks that you do during the day are very quickly done, like you can work in small bursts, then the Pomodoro method is something you may want to try out. The Pomodoro method is a method for working where you will work for 25 minutes on a project or a task, and then you'll take a 5-minute break. Then you'll do 4 rounds of that. So you'll work for 25 minutes, break for 5, work for 25, off for 5, on for 25, off for 5, on for 25, and then you're off for 15. So 4 rounds is roughly a 2-hour, you know, we're talking about like a 2-hour period of time here. So every 2 hours, you're taking a 15-minute break. And taking that one step further, it could be like every 4 hours, you're taking a 30-minute break. And in the US specifically, I think many of us, if you've ever had an hourly job before, this is a I would say like an archetype or a framework that's used very often. Like, you know, for every 2 hours of work, you get a 15-minute break. Every, you know, 4 hours of work, you get a half-hour break. But this is really something that's great if you're someone who likes to sprint and just do a little bit of work in bursts, or if you're someone who just has, you know, you're not the kind of person who's sitting there working on a project or a presentation, or you're not writing a book and you want to sit there for like a block of time. You're someone who could work in 25-minute increments and then take a break, especially if you're someone who gets distracted a lot and like wants to check the internet, wants to check their phone, or needs to, you know, make a call or take a potty break or take a snack break. If you're someone who likes to take frequent breaks, Pomodoro method will work for you. So definitely give it a try. So how do you actually use it? Make a to-do list of the tasks that you want to complete. That will either fit within the 25-minute increment, or, you know, you could just have a general task list and, you know, break them down into, I'm going to do this the first 25 minutes, then the second or the third, and then set a timer, right? So you stay on track. So you set that timer and you set 25 minutes and then you go. And then once the 25 minutes is up, you take your break, you check your Instagram, reply to emails, make a phone call, whatever it is. Then you do your next 25-minute timer. So this is something that I think is a great strategy for people who, like I said, if you're a sprinter and you like to feel the deadline of a clock ticking down, that's very helpful. If you're someone who's got a lot of little things that they need to work on, this can be helpful. If you're someone who likes to take frequent breaks, this could be helpful. It all depends on what your situation is. Now, next strategy that I like, and this is actually the one that I probably rely on the most, even though I am a sprinter, is block scheduling. So block scheduling is when you block out a set amount of time to work on projects and tasks. And I like these blocks of time to be 2 to 4 hours at one time. So essentially how you're going to use this is you're going to look at your day and you're going to block off, you know, really it says here 2 to 3 time blocks in your day. You could time block once a day and then use the rest of your day Pomodoroing or free time or white space or whatever, or just not being in a block schedule. But generally speaking, I like to look at this, like I think like 2 to 3, most people could break out 2 to 3 time blocks, like morning, afternoon, evening, for example. And obviously the length of time is going to matter. Like you could probably fit in more time blocks of 2 hours, but I don't know if you really should go above 3 time blocks in a day. I think it might just become too overwhelming for your focus. So yeah, you block out these time blocks. You say, this is a period of time I can work uninterrupted. This is a period of time I can work uninterrupted. And this is a period of time I can work uninterrupted. And then you assign projects or like a category of theme of tasks to work on in each block. So you know what you're going to be doing when, and you've got it scheduled out. So in terms of like Parkinson's law, right? You're actually scheduling what you're going to be working on, and you've got the time blocked out, and you have the ability to sit and focus on your work for that period of time. Okay, love block scheduling. That's usually how I actually end up doing a lot of my work. And then another thing that I want to talk about was themed work days, because this is also something else that I do. And it's exactly what it sounds like, themed work days. It's when you assign specific types of work to specific days of the week. So this works because it's always more productive to batch your work than to switch between different tasks. Like I said before, with the block scheduling, I don't think you should really do more than 3 time blocks in one day, even though like you could probably fill, like, let's say 12 hours, 2-hour time blocks, 12 of them. You could have 6 time blocks in 12 hours. You know what I'm saying? Like if you just did 2-hour time blocks, but that's switching between too many things. So your focus is being lost every time you switch. So when it comes to themed work days, when you batch, you're able to get more done in less time, and you're getting really focused because you're not switching between different tasks constantly. So how you would use a themed work day. First of all, in order to execute on themed work days, you need to evaluate the types of work that you do regularly. So this really works for me as an entrepreneur, like someone who runs their own business, because I can say that Monday is the day that I'm going to write blog posts. Tuesday is the day I'm going to film YouTube videos. Wednesday is the day that I'm going to take pictures. Thursday is the day I'm going to do client calls or something like that. Friday is the day I'm going to design. So you need to evaluate the types of work that you do regularly first. And then what you're going to want to do is keep a list for each type of work that you're breaking out, so that you've got like a contextual list of tasks, so that once that day comes, you have a list of things for yourself to do, like a batch of work that you need to do. And then, of course, for themed work days, you want to assign specific work to specific days of the week. I tend to theme like part of my week, and then the rest of my week is pretty flexible. But depending on the type of work you do, right? Like the work you do regularly, maybe you're someone who works in an office and maybe you can't theme every day of your week. Like that's not going to work for you, but maybe Mondays you can theme as your reporting day because you tend to do a lot of reporting that day anyway. So, look at what you're doing already, see what the work is that you have on your plate on a regular basis, and see what makes sense. I would also say too that you can actually combine themed work days with block scheduling and just like maybe break out like a 2 to 4 hour time block each day for a specific type of work, or a few days a week, or even one day a week, whenever you need it, right? So if you're someone who can batch their work because you're not someone who gets a ton of different types of things to work on, then themed work days, even pairing them with block scheduling could be very productive and a way to help you create focus. Now, just a few other tips, some general tips I want to give you guys just to round out this discussion of productive strategies, right? And these fundamental productivity strategies is I think that something a lot of people struggle with is actually writing a to-do list, which I know you guys think writing a to-do list, that's so easy. Get a piece of paper, just start writing things down. But like I said, it's so easy for your to-do list to get out of hand and get out of control and become overwhelming. So I think that the way that you write it is very important, because many of us actually track our tasks incorrectly, which leads us to misunderstanding our workload and ultimately leads us to overwhelm. So what I mean by this, and this is the big thing I want you guys to take out of this little discussion here, is there is a difference between tasks and projects. Tasks are not the same thing as projects. So a task is a single action item. So an example of a task could be call my mom at 3 p.m., right? That could be a task on your task list. A project is a collection of actions. So example of that would be plan surprise party for mom, right? Planning a surprise party for your mom is not a one single thing to do. You probably have many different items to do. That's a project. It's a collection of actions. But too often, I think that many of us will actually take a project and put it on a to-do list. To-do list should just be single task item, like single action items. So it's just a task. Projects themselves do not belong on your to-do list, only the actions. So do you see the difference between that? I know it's like kind of like a subtle difference and you might not have thought about this before, but I think one of the reasons we get very overwhelmed is that too many of us are making a to-do list and we're like, oh, I have 5 things to do today. I should be able to knock them out. But when half of them are projects that actually have multiple steps within them, multiple actions and tasks within them in order to be completed, you're actually getting in a situation where you're creating overwhelm. So make sure that you're very diligent when writing your to-do list, that you are writing down tasks, single action items, not projects. Because projects could be, it could be 2, it could be 10, it could be 20 steps or more. It could be tons of different tasks. And if you expect yourself to, complete a project in a day and it has way more tasks than you expected, or different things pop up because of it, it's going to create a sense of overwhelm and it's going to give you a misunderstanding of what your real workload is, right? So don't fall into that trap. Another tip I've got for you when it comes to writing your to-do list, and this is something you may have heard before, it's pretty, I think this is pretty solid advice, is to use action verbs. Okay, so sometimes when I'm making a to-do list, I'll do things like this: phone calls, emails, meal prep. Like I'll just put like general phrases or general words down on a list as though it's going to trigger for me what I'm supposed to be doing. But it's much better if you were to change something like phone calls to call mom, call Steve, call Amanda. Like if you actually list out all the people you need to call, right? Phone calls, it's almost like a project, right? The phone calls maybe were a project at that point where you're making more than one call. And then you just broke it down into the actual number of calls you need to make. And when you say something like call first, right? You're using that action verb, call this person. That gives you more of a sense of, I can do this, right? It empowers you a little bit more. I know it's semantics, literally it's semantics. It's just the way we're using words here, but words tend to matter. So I think if you use action verbs more often, it actually can entice you to act more often. Another example, if you wrote down like reporting on your list, right? Change that to run monthly income report. Be more specific with what you're writing down on your to-do list. Make sure you're starting with the action verbs so that it really gives you the sense that you have something to do and doesn't just leave you looking at it going, reporting. Okay, yeah, reporting. No, but run report, that is much more specific, or at least more action oriented. Okay, and then finally, I want to talk about this really big question that we've kind of been like circling this the whole time, I think, this conversation, is how do I avoid burnout? Because this is a problem that I think all of us suffer from, at least, on a regular basis. Everyone suffers from burnout. Burnout happens to the best of us. And it's a result really of overcommitment due to misunderstanding our workload, right? When we think we have a handle on what we need to get done, we misunderstand what our actual workload is, we end up overcommitting, we end up having too much on our plates, and it gives us a lack of focus and we become burnt out, overwhelmed. Like it mentally overwhelms us, it physically overwhelms us. It really puts a damper, like totally puts a complete stop on your productivity. Now, the thing you have to remember about productivity is that there is a natural ebb and flow to productivity, okay? Productivity isn't linear. It really comes in waves, okay? So there are going to be times when naturally you're feeling more energy and you are able to focus much quicker and you're just feeling much better and you're able to be more productive. And then after that period of high productivity will ultimately always come a low. There will be that ebb, right, where things are going down, right, where you have a little bit of less energy, because productivity, like the energy in our body, it's like I said, it's not linear, it's not consistent, it's not constant. So if you have a period of high productivity, expect there to be a period of low productivity, okay? So if you think about productivity like a wave, then you can prepare for the wave to hit, right? By having the plans in place, by making the to-do lists with the action items, with the action verbs, you can have those productive strategies ready for you to go. Like, I'm going to do Pomodoro method today, or I'm going to block schedule today. You can prepare, you can plan for it so that once the wave hits, you're able to ride it. You're able to take full advantage of that flow of energy and productivity. And then once it's come to an end, once it's, it started to like even out and it goes down, you can prepare for that area, that time period of rest and relax as well. And, enjoy the white space and understand that it's natural to have high periods of productivity and low periods of productivity. And it doesn't mean that you are not a productive person. It means that you are a person. It means that you are just like everybody else. You can't be at high productive, high execution mode 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So the thing I want you to remember always is that if you really are someone who's dealing with burnout a lot, is that scheduling that white space into your day, into your week is so important. Take the time to rest. Take the time to say, you know what, this is when I'm going to be not productive. Because when you give yourself that permission to have white space, that period of low productivity will ultimately be followed by a period of high productivity. So I know that sounds a little funny, like maybe you shouldn't be able to predict when you're going to be productive and when you're not going to be productive. But once you get into the habit of, putting, these established plans into place and preparing for that productive wave to hit, and then putting that time into your planner, into your day for the white space, basically you're going to end up controlling the wave yourself. As long as you understand and recognize that it is a wave, that there will be a period of high activity and a period of low activity, you will be able to control the wave. Like you can control the flow of the ocean. You're not going to be able to do it overnight, but if you pay attention to it and apply what we've already talked about through preparation and focus and things like that, what we've talked about in today's class, you will be able to control the wave much better. And a big part of that is acknowledging that you're not going to be able to do it all. You're not going to be able to be go, go, go 24/7, that you need the white space in your day, in your life, in order to balance it out with high periods of productivity. Okay? So now that was it. That was the end of our masterclass, but now we've got our Q&A. So I want to ask you guys, what can I help you with now? But at this time, hopefully, I haven't been able to see your comments, but hopefully you've got some questions for me. Okay, someone said, I love that you say you plan because you're lazy. After hearing that yesterday, again, it finally set in. I want to plan and be productive so I too can be lazy because it's inherently you want to have more time for other things. Exactly. And that's why I love productivity is I don't want to be like work. Like I'm naturally lazy. I want to be like chilling. So it's really important for me to be able to identify what the important work is so I get it done. That's why I do the 20%, not the 80%. Okay, I see some of you guys identifying what type of worker you are, which is excellent. That's awesome. Yeah, being a procrastinator stinks. Got some other people here giving some great digital advice for different planning tips and stuff, different programs and such. Okay, I think I have a question here from Edie that says, I have Planner Piece using a bullet journal, Google Calendar, and Evernote. My problem is prioritizing. Suggestions. Okay, so if you have What do you mean suggestions on prioritization? We obviously, in this class, we just talked about prioritization in terms of you decide what's a priority based on your values and expectations. So the values being number one, what you need and what you want to accomplish. Number two being what other people that are important to you need you to accomplish. And then you have the things that you need to consider, like the source of your tasks, the time period for, how long something will take, and the due date, so that you manage all three of those. And again, it's not necessarily black and white. It's very much you weighing the different options and making a choice for what the priority needs to be. So is that what you were asking? That is how I would suggest going about prioritizing. Okay. So we've got another question here that says, I love seeing a week on 2 pages, but I constantly run out of room. I feel like I need a day per page, but I hate how myopic it makes me think, just like you said, how in the world do I have the best of both worlds? Okay, so what I would say is if you're constantly running out of room, then you do need like a day per page. Like that's just, it just makes sense. Now, how are we going to deal with the view issue? What you could do is you could have, you could use week on 2 pages for certain things and then have a day per page as well. You might be duplicating information a little bit, but it might help you to have both, or to at least try using both for a little while to see if it really does bother you to have one view over another. Another thing I will say too is think about how you might be able to incorporate a month on 2 pages as well. So I think that you can maybe get away with a day per page if you've got a month on 2 pages that is managing things pretty well, because that's going to give you the higher level view as well. So I would say to play with some different inserts and see what ends up making the most sense for your brain. Another thing you might be able to do too is if you're interested in like integrating digital with paper planning, maybe you could have all your plans on digital as well, and you can get like a higher level view and just like look at it in a certain view that way. And then of course there's another option you have as well is, and I've done this before too, is if sometimes my week on 2 pages is not enough, but usually it is. On the times when it's not enough, I will use I will use my daily day timer pages like ad hoc, like for days that are specifically heavy. And that's why my daily day timer pages are actually undated, because I tend to use them as filler for heavy days. And what I just do is I take the page and I just insert it into my planner between the week it belongs to. So I'm really just adding pages as necessary instead of needing to use the day per page every day. So I hope that makes sense. But if you're someone who you use a week on 2 pages and you run out of room some days, but not every day, or maybe you're not running out of room tremendously, but if you're like every single day is packed and you absolutely need a full day every day, then you might just need to fully move over. Okay, so Clay asks, any tips on how to better capture info on paper? How to deal with that? One sole tool, multiple tools at home, on the go, depending on themes. I think I'm unclear about what you're asking when you say to better capture info on paper. Do you mean like writing things down, how to get better at writing things down? Okay, and then you said, I totally rely on my planner for work tasks, but sometimes I lose. Okay, you lose something personal here and there. And I would say that, Clay, that the thing about this is probably that when it comes to work, you're probably being really diligent about writing things down, because I think for many of us, when it comes to work, we tend to be more diligent when it comes to work than we are with ourselves, because we naturally prioritize other people above us, like total like woman problem. So I would say that this is just going to come through time and reminding yourself to write things down that are personal as well. So, maybe you put a alarm on your phone or something for like once a day, and just actually like have the alarm be like, spend 15 minutes brain dumping your personal tasks in your planner, right? So it's something that you're going to be building a habit into your day based on this alarm. Because sometimes we do need to be reminded. That's the thing. Like, that's why productivity is hard. We often have to be reminded about what we need to do, or we forget because our brains are not perfect. Okay, I got a question. If you're overwhelmed because of being disorganized with planning, where is the best place to start and begin draining the swamp? Okay, so what I would say is, if you are starting right now and you're super disorganized with your planning, the first thing I would do is sit down with a pen and a paper and give yourself a nice chunk of time for this, like at least an hour. And I would write down everything you're holding on to in your head. I would do an epic brain dump. I would write down all the things you're thinking about, all of the projects that you're working on, all of your goals, all of the upcoming events and things that you're thinking about, right? I would do a massive brain dump and let it take as much time as necessary, because brain dumps can take a lot of time, especially if you're not someone who's used to doing them. Like the first brain dump you do is going to take forever. And don't stop writing down the tasks until you like cannot think of anything else anymore. You're like, what's my name? I don't remember. I wrote it down. You have nothing else being stored in your brain, right? I would start with the brain dump. Then what you can do is go through your list of what you've written down on the brain dump and identify things that are actually important, right? Because you're going to probably write down in a brain dump things that are just like for someday maybe lists, that are just an idea, that are silly things, or you're going to write down like recipe ideas you had or an idea for a business or things like that. So you can actually start organizing the information off of that major brain dump list. You can start crossing things out that you know are just useless things that you wrote down. And then what you can do is, based on like some of the things we talked about in today's masterclass, right? You can pick a planner, pick your calendar styles, and start integrating those plans into your planner. That's how I would start if you're completely a planner newbie or you are completely disorganized with your planner. That is what I would suggest. Okay, someone said, I'm a procrastinator. How do I change to either being a marathoner or a sprinter? And can you explain the difference between the two so you can figure out which you should try to be? How does sprinter work on long-term projects? I know you're a sprinter and I might be too, but I try to understand how a sprinter works. Okay, so first thing you have to keep in mind is that there is no better. Like there is no better, it's just which one works for you. I think if you are a procrastinator, probably being a sprinter is the next easiest thing to do because you're already waiting to the last minute anyway. We're just going to try to bump you up so that you're waiting to the last minute and actually achieving instead of getting overwhelmed. So to specify again, the difference between a marathoner and a sprinter. A marathoner is someone who does small chunks of work over a long period of time. A sprinter is someone, and really a marathoner is someone who's very self-motivated, if you think about it, because it takes a lot of self-discipline to be able to do a little bit every day. I'm a sprinter. Like we said, sprinters they like to wait to the last minute before something's due. But they act because they're thrilled by that time limit. Like when I know I'm running out of time, I get a whole bunch of stuff done. Like you would not believe how productive I was yesterday preparing for this masterclass. Why? Because I knew it was coming and I knew I had to execute. Now, there is a fine line between sprinter and procrastinator because a sprinter could easily become a procrastinator because the issue there is the overwhelm that sets in. And the overwhelm, as we already talked about, that comes from a few different factors. Number one, not having a clear plan in place, right? So if you didn't have a plan in place for what you were going to do, easily you could become a procrastinator from being a sprinter. Number two, if you are unclear about your workload, like your workload is overwhelming, like you don't have a clear definition of how long things should take and things like that. For me, I'm a sprinter and I generally know how long things will take me to get done. Even if I don't know exactly, I know that I know the time frame that I need. And that's just based on experience, to be completely honest. Like I said earlier with prioritization, it's a balance between multiple different factors, and it's like a muscle that you need to use. And the more you use it, the more second nature prioritizing becomes. So really is a practice makes close to perfect situation, because you're never going to be perfect with anything, especially with prioritizing. You're always going to mess something up. Like I mess things up all the time. I go, oh, you did this instead of that. You should have done that, silly person. So, it's always going to be a little bit of a struggle. You're never going to be perfect, but it's through practice that you're going to actually figure out that sweet spot where you feel confident with the time period that you need to actually really accomplish something. So if you are a procrastinator, what I would say is get really good on project planning, like write out what your project plans are. So make sure you've got a plan. And I would set some alarms too. So like I would, if you decide to become a marathoner, it means you need an alarm every day that tells you what you need to get done. Or in your planner, every day you need to have a piece of a project written out. Like I would just have it already written out ahead of time. And you have to be disciplined. Like these are things that I can't give you an answer for how to be self-disciplined. It's trial and error. It's giving yourself motivation. Sometimes rewards help people who are not self-motivated. Like if you set yourself a reward, like I'm going to buy myself this present after I finish this project, that can be helpful to people. But self-discipline, at the end of the day, it's you. Like, it's all you. So if you can set alarms to help you remember, if you can create the project plan and break the plans out every day, the more details you can give yourself, the better. And then when you wake up in the morning, you know, taking care of yourself, get yourself mentally prepared, you know, make sure you slept well the night before, make sure you've got your caffeine if that's what you need to get focused, because you need to get the work done. But there's nothing I can do, or really anyone can do, to make you do anything. You know what I'm saying? It's all self-motivation at that point. But prepping and planning and knowing what you need to do, that is what you can control. Okay. Someone said, how can I get a day per page format for the entire year to fit in my binder? Probably won't be able to be honest. There's 365 pages. Well, divided by 2, you know, most planners won't hold that. So unless you get like one of those giant 3-ring binders, because you said 8.5 and 11 by 11 inch planner, unless you've got like one of those giant, like huge, like illegal binders, you're not going to fit them in. That's the answer. There's no hack to that. You just, you know, I don't fit all of my full year. I do 6 months at a time, and I use a week on 2 pages. So I do half a year and half a year. So just pick the time period that fits the best for you, that you can deal with. Okay, someone said, juggling multiple sections of a business, what is the best planner method to keep all my tasks separate? Planner method to keep all your tasks separate. What I would say is, it doesn't matter how many sections of a business you have, like how many different business categories or how many different businesses you're running. I actually wouldn't keep your tasks separate, or at least I wouldn't have more than one to-do list. Like you need to have one master monthly task list that has all your tasks on it. And then what I would suggest is the project planning. Break your business projects out onto project plans. And then what you could do is, in a binder, in a planner, sure, you could have all your projects for section A of your business in this section, and then all of them for section B in the next one, and all of them for section C in the third one. But ultimately, you need to be taking all of the items as necessary and moving them onto the master monthly task list. And this is something I realize a lot of people struggle with, is they think because they have different things that they're working on that they need to compartmentalize. The problem is that your day and your life is not compartmentalized. You only have one life. You only have 24 hours in the day. So you need one task list that has everything on it that you need to do, and all of it needs to be prioritized. So does that make sense? You can organize the project plans as you see fit. Like if you have a business and you're like, here's my marketing project plans, and here's my, my product development project plans, and here's my legal development plans, or whatever. You can separate those out, but all the tasks that relate to May need to be on your May master task list so that you can apply them to your weeks and your days. And everything that applies to June needs to be on June's list, because you don't want to have a bunch of extra lists, because it means you have to check more than one place to figure out everything that you need to get done. And that's how overwhelm happens, because you're not getting the full big picture of what you need to do. And that's how items get missed, because you forgot to check this list. So keep one list for everything you need to do in the month. Your project plans can be organized as you see fit. Does that make sense? Okay, Tanya says, can you talk a bit more about self-discipline and actually executing on the plan? I can come up with a lovely actionable project plan, but then it tends to stagnate. I mean, this is the thing that's hard about life, Tanya, right? Is that it's our life and we have to be accountable for it. I know that sounds like, maybe that sounds like really blunt to people, but it's like your self-discipline has to come from inside of you. And actually, this is actually something I could talk about that wasn't really part of this. And maybe this is something that you might want to check out. I don't think it's in the resource guide, but there was a book that I read called, I'm going to get the name wrong, Smarter, Faster, Better. It's Charles Duhigg's follow-up to, or his second, the book he did after The Power of Habit. And he has this discussion of an internal locus of control versus an external locus of control. And what that essentially means is people who have an internal locus of control are motivated by their own self-desires to accomplish things because they feel empowered and confident that the actions that they take will affect the quality of their life and how their life will unfold. People who have an external locus of control think that no matter what they do, and I hate to say it like this, but it's literally people who are in the victim mode. People who have an external locus of control believe that no matter what they do, their life is like already on a predestined plan. They're already, the man's keeping them down or whatever it is that people say, right? Those people believe that they actually don't control themselves, and therefore they have a horrible time with self-discipline. So I would say, first and foremost, look at your life and really see how the things that you do really do affect it. Like when you wake up in the morning, the choices you make directly impact the results you get. Yes, there are lots of things that impact our quality of life and how our lives unfold and things like that, but ultimately, we are the ultimate deciders. Like we're the ones responsible. It's our life. And even to some extent, even though people can come and interact with us and try to interfere with what we're doing, we have to be the ones that put the boundaries up. So in terms of self-discipline, like I said, it is a muscle. It is a muscle that needs to be used. And any way you can coax yourself into building the habits, try it, right? Try it and see what works. Because it is a habit that needs to be formed. You can lose it. It is use it or lose it. If you don't use it, you're going to lose the power to, be disciplined. Because if you start slacking, you will get lax. But the only other, thing that I haven't said yet that I guess I could add on that subject is streamline your life to the point where you're not getting overwhelmed. This is where the 80-20 rule in many ways comes in, is that if you only have 20% of the things to do, you might actually have a greater chance of doing them than if you're trying to do everything. So keeping things very simple for yourself, taking care of yourself, and staying inspired and motivated, like following people who inspire you. Like I assume you follow me because hopefully I give you information and I inspire you to act. Creating a daily practice of like finding inspiration. Sometimes people wake up in the morning and they have a devotional and that helps them to set their frame for the day. Definitely do that if that's something that helps you, or read a quote a day, or listen to some music that gets you jazzed up to work. But no one can take the action for you. It's about you really saying, I'm the one who's going to affect my life, and either I'm going to get this project done or I'm not. If I do it, that's awesome. And my life is going to be however much better because I was able to accomplish it. And if I don't, I have no one to blame but myself. Maybe that stark realization is motivating for some people. For me, I know it is. Like if I know I don't take action, I know nothing's going to get done. So usually there's a tipping point where my laziness pushes into productivity because I really want something to happen. Okay, so it sounds like some people liked that discussion. Yes, it is very blunt, but it's true. I mean, no one else can do it for you. Like, hopefully everybody on this call is like 18 and above. Mommy's not here to hold your hand anymore. You know what I mean? Like most of you are probably the mommies now. So it really is just about getting started, taking action. Just do it. You know what I mean? It's the hardest thing in the world. But every time you take a step, it gets easier. Okay, so Lauren says, I struggle with prioritizing because I always put everyone else before myself, and I never go in with the mindset of what's important to me. Any tips for determining values? You're a total people pleaser, and I'm struggling to find your inner voice. Okay, number one, Lauren, I would highly suggest you check out that book, Better Than Before by Gretchen Rubin. She talks about people pleasers in there. She talks much more about different things than I brought into this conversation today of the work styles. But so you might actually find that interesting, discussing the different types, like personality types. In the personality types, I'm actually, and someone actually brought this up in like a YouTube video once in the comments, in her personality archetypes, I'm a rebel. So I'm the person where you're the person who wants to please other people. I'm the person that if someone tells me to do something or tells me not to do something, the likelihood is I will do the exact opposite. So if you said to me, Alexis, I need you to do this, and I'll go, oh, do you? I'm not going to do that. Or if you said, Alexis, you can't do that, I'll go, watch me. So that is just your personality archetype, is that you like to please other people. There's nothing wrong with that. Like I think it's actually a very wonderful trait to be someone who thinks of others that highly. And it's not an unusual situation for women specifically to be in the situation where they're prioritizing everyone else above themselves. Now, that being said, you have to remember that you cannot serve from an empty bowl. Unless you put yourself first as your first priority, you cannot be expected to help others as fully as you could. So in this way, I'm actually going to reverse psychologicalize you right now. I know that was not a word, but you know what I'm saying. I'm going to use some reverse psychology on you if you're a people pleaser. First of all, I'm going to tell you about this wonderful analogy I like to make. If you guys have ever been on an airplane before, you know that at the beginning, before you take off, there's that whole safety presentation that they give. And they say during the presentation that in the event of an emergency, oxygen masks are going to fall from the ceiling, and you are instructed to secure your own mask before helping those around you. That means that if you're a mom and you're sitting next to your like 12-year-old kid who has got asthma, and this thing comes down, and you're like, my kid is like going into like some sort of asthmatic shock, you are not supposed to help them first. You are supposed to put your own mask on first, even though you see them struggling. Why? Because most likely, if you go to help them first, you're going to pass out in the middle of helping them, and then both of you are SOL. But if you put your own mask on first, if you use your own faculties to put your own mask on first, now you are safe, to some extent. I mean, this is like an air emergency. I don't know how safe we're all going to be, but, we're just going to keep going with this analogy. You've secured your mask first, then you can help your kid and anyone else around you that you have access to, because you've taken care of yourself first. So in the reverse psychology way, Lauren, I'm going to say that unless you're the person who's got their stuff together and is physically taking care of yourself and mentally taking care of yourself, you are going to be really bad at taking care of other people or helping other people or pleasing other people. Even if right now you're like, oh, I'm doing an okay job taking care of myself and I guess I'm helping everyone else. If you really want to help people, you have to be like the best version of yourself. Like if you bring your A game, you're just going to like raise the standards like tremendously. You're going to be able to help people and affect people in a way that's way more than you could ever imagine. This is one of the reasons why, I hate to like talk about like all like the different gurus of everything, right? Like, I'm a productivity guru. Like this is what I do. I study productivity and I execute it and I learn from it. And I have to struggle every day to get my ish in order so I can set an example that's higher for everyone else, so that when I come to these master classes, I can give you better examples. I can give you more tips. I can add value, right? Me being on my A game helps you guys be on a higher game as well. So same thing with you. The more, and what I was going to, sorry, was other gurus, right? So when I do a lot of research in success and productivity. Obviously, it's my job. So when I look around and you see people like Tony Robbins, Oprah, successful sports and business people, all of these individuals have this sense of the importance of taking care of themselves so they can take care of everybody else more. So this is why, like, you see, like, Tony Robbins, like, this guy, like, is so intense. Like, he does all these crazy things. He has these crazy morning routines, and, like, he has crazy rituals that all help him to essentially get his energy up for the day so he can bring it in life fully. So think about yourself that way. You may be thinking, like, oh, I'm, like, more than a stone's throw away from Tony Robbins, right? But not really, because you're a human being. So whatever he can accomplish, you can accomplish too. So figure out what it is that you want in your life, right? From your life, and take those steps to be the best version of yourself first so that you can then be a better version of yourself for everybody else. And that will be tremendously of higher value. And I get it. Not all of us like know what we want from life. And not all of us have like project plans like ready at the whim. And not all of us, you know, are sure like what we want, you know, for breakfast tomorrow, let alone like where we want to be in 3 to 5 years. I totally get that. But if you can have an understanding of the things that make you happy and the things that light you up and the things that re-energize you, if you can do some of that, even if it's like one thing every day, then you are going to come from a place where you've served your needs and now you can help serve other people's needs. Did I just take that on like the weirdest direction? Because I'm like looking at this question, I'm like, you may have like taken that in a weird direction, but I hope that that has kind of been an inspirational thing for you to think about, or gave you some sort of wheels turning. Are wheels turning, Lauren, in your head right now? Let's see. I got a question here. Is the daily task planner in the handout your day per page insert? No, it's not. Nope. It's just it's like a generic daily page. What if things that I work on are not considered traditional projects? For example, sales calls, PR calls, e-news, content creation, image creation. Okay. Anything. Okay. The thing is that what is a project? Anonymous 1308. What is a project? A project is just a collection of individual tasks. So if your sales calls or your PR's calls or your image creation or your video content creation, let's use video content creation, okay? My YouTube, when I do video content, right, for YouTube, it's a project. Every video I make is a project. Why? Because I have multiple tasks that I need to accomplish in order to get it done. I have to, A, set up to film. B, get myself set up to look nice in front of the camera. C, number three, I need to actually have the content pre-done, like either the topic or the talking points or whatever, okay? So I need like a script of some sort. Then I also need to sit there and film it, right? And then I need to transfer the files to my computer, and then I need to edit the files, and then I need to export, and then I need to upload it to YouTube, and then I need to do a cover image, and then I need to do any promotional things, and then I need to fill out the YouTube description, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Everything, like YouTube, it's like film a YouTube video. That's not one thing to do. That's like 10 things to do. So it doesn't matter what you consider a traditional or non-traditional project, right? That's anything that's more than one, takes more than one step to complete is a project. The top 5 are supposed to be projects, correct? So it's 5 projects you're going to focus on in that week. Or 3 if you can only handle 3. Remember, we're only supposed to be doing 3 projects in any given time period. So, but I think it's very possible that you could, like, especially with like short-term projects, I tend to have a lot of short-term projects that I do and less long-term projects. So I can get a lot of, you know, most people can get, something that only takes like an hour or 2. Like filming a YouTube video is something I could do in a day. I could do all 10 of those steps in a day if I wanted to, or I could do one piece of it. Well, probably not just one piece, but I could break it out over a couple of days. Like I could prep one day, film one day, edit one day, upload one day, do marketing for it another day. I could split up any way I want. But generally speaking, something that is shorter term, you could get more of them done in a shorter period of time, which is why I choose 5. Because I feel like touching one project a day is reasonable. But it's whatever works for you. If it's just one project, then just use one project. Okay, and someone says, it helped me so much to answer the question about taking care of yourself first. I'm a preschool teacher, and if I don't take care of myself and I'm not happy, my kids really feel it. Absolutely. That's a really amazing example, actually, of someone who really cannot be serving from an empty bowl because, geez Louise, is there anything more anything more important than a preschool teacher? Like, I know that probably actually sounded a little bit like I was being facetious or something, but this is a person who is shaping the developing minds of children. So if you're not on your A game, And kids feel everything. Kids are like, well, people in general, humans and animals, right? Things that are alive feel energy, right? But like kids, oh, they totally pick up on energy. Or let's just say, unlike adults, kids have a harder time ignoring other people's energy. Let's put it that way. Like, you know, my pet, like my dog. He feels my energy. Kids feel your energy. So if you are not at 100%, the kid knows it, and it almost brings their levels down too. Could you imagine anyone else who like has a more important job than taking care of developing children? Like, just isn't. Did you really need to be serving from a totally full bowl? In fact, you should have a bonus bowl just in case the first bowl gets knocked over by one of the kids. You need like a couple of bowls there to serve from. Okay, and Lauren says, yes, thank you. This really helped to put things in a new perspective. Great, I'm glad. I know that kind of went off, but I think that that was a helpful conversation to have. You guys, it's 1:36 right now. We are like an hour, almost an hour and 40 minutes into this. Get me your questions, you guys. Get me your questions. Is it reasonable to combine personal and business in one place, or they should be kept separate? Yes, combine them. Combine them. Absolutely. Like I was saying before in that question from someone who had asked about separating their business task lists. You only have one day with 24 hours in it. You should only have one task list. And I get this question a lot from people about, should I have more, you know, is it okay for me to have more than one planner? I don't think so, because your planner represents your life. So if you have the contents of your life separated in two different planners, you don't have like 48 hours in a day. You only have 24. You're not living two lives. Your personal and your business are both reflections of your life. So I think that having in one place, all of the things in one place is important. Now, can you use other planners or other binders to organize other information? Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I get it. Planners are relatively small, right? Like they're not like a filing cabinet where we can shove everything in it. So sure, use it to organize additional information, but your task lists, your to-dos, your functional planning items, your schedule, your daily tasks, you know, all of that needs to be in one place, no matter if it's personal or business. Now, the one exception to that rule, the one exception where I'm like, okay, it's okay for you to keep them separate. If you happen to have a job that you go to that's like a 9 to 5 or whenever you work, where you do not take your work home with you, your work stays at home, like you punch in, you punch out, something like that, where work stays at work, it does not come home with you, then fine. You can have a planner at work where you just write your work tasks in it and just write your work plans and stuff like that in it. Fine. Then you can have two. You can have the one for your personal life and one for your work. But many of us take and not everybody, many of us take our work home. Many of us do personal things at work as well. It all crosses over. So one planner for many of us, not all of us, many of us need one planner. I so love about white space and the time blocking. Sorry, I'm like reading this wrong. I tried to time block, but what I find is that I will blow through the time block because I always try to get in one more thing. How do I stop doing that? Well, you just answered it. If you know that you always try to fit in one more thing, then your answers are twofold. Answer number one is either make the time block bigger, but that might become a catch-22 when you're like, I'll just do one more thing and one more thing and one more thing. Okay, so that might be a catch-22. But maybe, you know, like maybe you always set 2-hour time blocks and maybe you need to make it 3 hours. So that could be realistic. Or option number 2, stop doing the one more thing. Make a hard stop. Or actually option number 3, make white space after the time block. So if you do the one more thing, it's not a big deal. Remember, these productivity strategies, yes, there's like a way they should be executed, like ideally. But if you have a 2-hour time block and it takes you 2.5 hours to get the work done, as long as it's not negatively impacting the next thing, like you didn't like immediately schedule something afterwards that now you're late for because you're trying to shove one more thing in, there's wiggle room, you guys. The idea is just to use these strategies to organize your day and organize your tasks in a way that A, makes sense to your brain and the way you work, and B, ensures that you're maximizing your productivity so that you're actually getting the work done, you're actually executing. So maybe that's not a problem. Maybe blowing the time block isn't a problem. Maybe you just think it's a problem. It's only a problem if it creates problems. If it ain't broke, you don't need to fix it. Okay, well that helped, good. Okay, you guys. Next question. Or are you guys done? I feel like the questions have slowed. So what I'm going to do is say a couple more minutes. And if I don't see a question, I guess we'll wrap up. And look, we're at like 2 hours, about 2:45. Perfect. One thing I will say right now, while there are still many of you watching, is that please, 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 at the bottom of the page where we're watching this, there is a thing that says, let me know your feedback. And it says, click here to complete a brief survey about this masterclass so that I can improve this in future events. It is a simple 10-question survey. If you would take a minute and fill this out so I can get feedback on this event today, that would be so helpful. Because as you guys know, like I just recently upgraded this, right? This was an upgrade, or like I said, like a 2.0 version of this class from when it originally launched. So I take what I learned and I make it better. So your feedback really does go a long way in helping me to improve not just this class, but any future classes and content that I create, because it helps me to know what it is that is helpful to you guys and what I'm doing that maybe is a waste of time. Because remember, technically 20% of what I said here today is going to be impactful to you guys and the other 80% is not. So what that 20 to 80% is, I only know if you guys give me feedback. Okay. What have you found to work best for you as you practice prioritization to get better at it? Okay, I'm going to give you a really interesting answer to this. I actually think that the best way to learn prioritization, to actually get better at it, is to quickly make a decision and stick to it. You could probably spend a really long time weighing all those factors to determine what's a priority. That would probably waste time in the doing, which is the really important part. So if you can just, take the gut reaction of what you think actually needs to be done and execute. Now, let's say you execute and you find out later that you misprioritized, right? It causes a conflict. Okay, you've learned from that, right? And your internal meter for your prioritization meter is going to be adjusted. So every time you make the choices, right, you're going to adjust and readjust. It's like you're calibrating yourself in a way. I know that sounds crazy, but you're like calibrating yourself. But the big thing is to make a decision quickly and execute. And I will say this because, I'll say from experience that at one point, you guys know I worked in like Fortune 50 sales and marketing. I worked with someone at one point who was a manager, like a high-level manager, who was the worst at prioritizing and making decisions. Because this person would take forever to even decide to make a decision. And when they did, like as soon as they started, they would backpedal. So I think, honestly, that it's one of those things, like it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. I think that because we're all trying to do our best, and that's the thing you got to remember, everyone's just trying to do their best. If you can make a decision, like a gut decision quickly and execute and just like go on it, you're probably saving yourself enough time that like if it didn't work out, you have time to like try something else. But then you're also like helping to create a calibration so that prioritization becomes a knee-jerk reaction as opposed to like a deliberation that you need to make in like a chamber with like a group of people, like, which should we do next? You know, obviously there's situations in life where, yeah, you need a whole chamber of people to like decide on something, right? There's going to be situations you'll have in your life when it's not just you deciding the priorities. But I do think that learning to knee jerk is going to be the most valuable. Like, that's the most valuable, and sticking to your guns with it. Like, you know what, let's say that example with the boss and the report and the team member. And let's say I tell my boss I can't do it or whatever, because I'm doing the presentation with my team member, and I prioritize the team member above my boss. And let's say because of that, the boss goes to find someone else, and the person, it takes too much time and they don't have the report in time. Let's be honest, most of us are not doing brain surgery here. So, your boss might be like peeved, but if he comes to you, you just say, at the time, I thought this was the best choice. I'm sorry. This is what it was. I'm sorry. Like, I'm sorry. Forgive me. I will fix it better next time. You know what I mean? Like, we fall and we can only really get back up. You know what I mean? Like, that's really all we can do. So I think that it's more important to try and like just get into the habit of acting, because that is going to really lead you to be a real execution person. And through trial and error, you're going to learn how to prioritize. And like I said, you're never going to be 100%. I am definitely not 100%, but I'm pretty good at it, I would say. I think I'm pretty good at it. And it's because I don't question. Once I've decided on a path, I do it. I hope that makes sense. Someone said, can you briefly walk through the handouts for today? Okay. The handouts actually are, if you're looking at the chat right now, underneath, I kind of have a description of what the handouts are. So you've got a handout for the slides. So it's all the slides that I showed, and it's the handout so you can make notes. So hopefully you guys printed that out ahead of time, and were able to make notes. Like, I just think that's an easy way to organize, but it's like a nice reference for you to keep. So that's one of the handouts you have. You've got a productivity and planning resource guide that you open up. It's a PDF, and it doesn't look like it has links, but if you like hover over something, you click on it, it'll open up the web page for you. And that just has some different resources. And of course, I have so many different resource guides. I might send you guys out another productivity resource guide that I have as well. I feel like there can never be enough resources, right? But I also try not to overwhelm you, which is why this is a little bit of a more streamlined resource guide that you guys have. Okay, then you have a pack of printables that are notes, goals, and project planning, right? So this is meant for you, two things. Number one, it was to help you if you wanted to go through this class and take notes, but also I think that having good note sheets are very important. A lot of us like take notes the wrong way, I would say. Like, you'll just get a piece of paper and it's just like a blank piece of paper and you take notes. But I think that it's really helpful. And this is like not just for like being in the masterclass, but also in life. If you're like project planning, or you've got a meeting at work, or like you're at a PTA meeting or something like that, like in many situations in life where we have to take notes. So these are just a few different variations of some notes pages that help you organize information. That's it. So that you've got like a dedicated spot for, tasks that you might have to do, resources and things like that. I also have some goal trackers in there for you. If you're someone who's getting started with prioritizing yourself and setting yourself goals and things like that, it's just kind of like a little mini pack of just like a sampler of different types of pages that you might want to use. And then project planning is in there as well. We already talked about project planning. Now, it's a very similar project planning page that's in my bundles. The bundle has a few more pages in it though, obviously. So it's just like a freebie to help you guys get started project planning and thinking about tracking your tasks. Then you have a daily task planner page. Someone had asked about that. That's not my normal day on one page. It's more of a very organized, very compartmentalized one. And you paying attention to the masterclass, you'll see how like top 3 projects and stuff like that are in their task list schedule. So It's to help you start getting organized. If you're someone who, like someone asked earlier, what if you're totally disorganized mess? Start with that planning page. You know, even before maybe you decide to finalize what your planner inserts are going to be, because yes, it is a day per page. It's like undated, you fill it out. But if you're someone who wants to start acting and planning and prioritizing and being more productive, it's simple, but it's all you need, really, literally. And then you've got a set of printable stickers. So it's just a PDF that you print on sticker paper. And you can cut them out and put them in your planner if you want some inspiration. So does that help? Those are the handouts you got. Those are your class materials. We're coming up to 3 hours, you guys. I think we should try to hard stop at the 3 hour mark. So if there's any other questions, let me know now. Okay. Going once. Going twice. Remember, if you have any questions after this class, or if you're someone watching the replay, feel free to email me. I should actually put a link up on this page for you guys to just send a direct email to me. I will actually make a note to do that. Let me put a note down. That would be good, probably. I'll add a direct link for emails, just so no one's confused about what my email address is. Okay, well, it looks like everyone is saying goodbye and thank you. So I think, you guys, we're going to call that a wrap then. Of course, if you have any questions later or you think about something, feel free to email me, you guys. I'm here for you. Let me know what you're struggling with, and I'm more than happy to help you. But thank you guys all so much for attending today's class and being such a great audience. I hope you guys really enjoyed this. I love doing live events. I really think that, I don't know, I love having fun doing live stuff. I feel like, number one, it puts pressure on me to like perform and like come up with some of my best ideas. And I like to actually talk and interact with you guys as much as possible because, you know, a lot of my content, you know, is just stuff I make and put out. So when I get to interact with you live, that's so fun. So I hope you guys found that this live interaction to be valuable if you were here for the live part of the class. And if not, if you're watching the replay, definitely hit me up if you have any questions. And I would be glad to help you with your productivity situations and applying what you've learned in the class. And yeah, make sure you guys are following me on social media at MissTrenchcoat on Instagram. Make sure you're on my YouTube and make sure you hit subscribe to that, and you know, check my blog out and all that good stuff so that you can get more tips regularly. And yeah, I guess that's it, you guys. I think we had a good event today, and I hope this has been super helpful for you guys. And don't forget to do the survey at the bottom of the page. I would love it if you could do the survey. Quick 10-question survey, nothing major. Most of them are multiple choice, only a few like open-ended that you can fill in. So that would be very helpful to me to make sure that I'm improving these classes as much as possible. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys later, okay? Bye-bye.